Hi there. Hi, Peggy. Nice to see you. Hi again, Rebecca.
Hi.
All right. Let me see who else is here. Hi, Rachel. Hi, Les. Hi, Mary Ellen. And Catalina is still connecting to audio, so she can't hear me. So I'm not greeting her yet. And here come some more people. And here we go. Here am I on my second computer. All right. So there's always the people who are here right on time, and then we wait a little bit, and then people start straggling in. Um, but I'm sure that we're gonna get some more people to show up. So before I start, let me turn this light on because the reflection in the back is pretty strong. That might help a little bit better. I appreciate the people who have been working hard during the week and posting in the Padlet. Let me put the Padlet link here so everyone can go to it. And here we go. It's in the chat. I'll put the post there again a few more times because every time someone pops in, their chat kind of starts from zero. And let me share my screen. And we're going to start by sharing the Padlet. Oh, I'm thinking someone's behind me. My dog just walked in, but he's normally not this noisy. I was thinking it was someone else. He's a tiny little not noisy dog. So I don't know why he must have stepped on something. Anyway, so here's the chat, not the chat. Here's the, and remember to go to the chat, you guys, and to give me a hey ho, hello, I'm here kind of comment in the chat, please. And so here's our Padlet. And in our Padlet, I see at the top, because it posts by order of, of when things were posted, I see some people were completing a lot of their work. Like again, like the other class Odessa, I see you've been going back and doing the recordings, the classes you missed and putting in all the work. So thank you so much for doing that. And same with Katarina, who went back and did some of the work. And then at the very top here, I see 3 people who created some work with the files that I gave as homework. And then Odessa created some with her own. So I'm going to start with this one where Odessa, thank you, by the way, for posting all your layers here, because that's really makes it easier for me to see the kind of work and changes that you did. And so basically I can see that you used to have a background, just, the mountains, the flowers, the blue sky without clouds was the original one. You added some curves. I haven't talked about curves yet, but there's so many different adjustment layers, and she actually did use a ton of them. These are all adjustment layers. The first one she has down here is curves. So the fact that it's here means it affects only the bottom, versus all of these adjustment layers affect everything else underneath. So all these layers, she has some clouds that she added there. She has a sign that she added there, and she has a person that she added there. And all of these adjustment layers affect everything that's under them, but this little curve affects only this one. Does that make sense? So, and then this one affects this one. Since it's there and it isn't linked and clipped only to this one, those curves would normally affect the bottom one too, but she has masked it out to affect only the part where the body is, okay? So that's why in that sense, so what I'm trying to say, this curves would affect everything, like these do, but in this case, she masked it. So this curve that she did there only affects the person, okay, because of the masking. And then over here, she brought in a big picture with a sign, and then she used a mask to get rid of the rest of the picture and show only the sign. So you see how these masks that she's doing are being used both as masks for the adjustment layers and as masks. So this is an adjustment layer mask, and then this is a layer mask where she cut something out. She brought in this whole image. You can see there. Let me see if I can see it a little bit bigger. I don't know that I can make it any bigger there. You can see here that she brought a bigger picture and she did a layer mask, and a layer mask is for cutting things out. And she cut out all the other stuff and left only the sign itself available. That's a layer mask. And then this one too. She brought in a whole picture of someone standing in front of these. And notice that the background of this photo is very similar to the background of that photo. So this is one of those masks where you could have been pretty sloppy and it would still work. I don't know if her mask was sloppy or not. I'm not trying to say that because I can't tell at this distance. But by sloppy, I mean behind the person, you have the same flowers. Behind the hat, you have the same. It looks like there's less mountains. There's more like sky, but it's near enough that the lighting is probably similar. So then that matches much more easily than something from a completely different place. And then the sign seems to be coming from a very similar place. Maybe there's less flowers behind it or not, because that's why in the thumbnails it's hard to really tell what was there. But again, it seems originally that it's similar enough of a place. And that's a great way to do composites where you have lighting that is similar. So all of these things, as far as their background and their cutting out, they look like they belong. There's a different concern I have about these as to why they might look like they don't belong. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. First, I want to mention the clouds. And what do you think about the clouds? Do they look like they belong? This isn't a criticism, Odessa, by the way. I'm really, really happy that these got done. Oh, by the way, is Odessa here yet? Oh, shoot, she's not here. Oh, that makes it bad to be talking so much about her. Not so bad. You guys are still learning from it, but I wish she were here to learn from it. But anyway, she's not here, so I can't ask her certain questions. But the clouds, you can tell, look really like they were clipped and put on. Does that make sense? And that's because the color on the edging of the cloud that came from a very deep blue sky, and she's putting it on top of a very lightweight blue. So if you're trying to make it look real, this doesn't look like she's trying to make something fantastic. She's trying to look something that's real. Then you need to either work on the coloring for the clouds or work on the coloring on your sky to darken it, or this one to lighten it, right? So you need to work more on that masking. The other thing I wanted to mention here that I can see as a problem is the resolution. That's why this person who seems to have the same background doesn't seem to fit here, because in this resolution, the photo flowers look pretty good, but she over here has been stretched out, and then the resolution, she doesn't match the resolution with that. Does that make sense? So even though she's in the same background, there's an issue with having been expanded and made bigger, way much quicker and out of context. And that's a little bit what we're going to talk about today. I left you at the whole conversation of what happens when you transform, and that seems to be what happened here. All right, I'm going to move away from this example since she's not here, but it was a perfect example of trying a lot of different things and using math in 2 different ways. So it's a stellar example of doing the homework. And by the way, there's a couple of other stellar examples here that Catalina, Rebecca, and Mary Ellen, you guys used the photos I gave you. Rebecca added, what's that, a temple, a Chinese temple, which clearly doesn't belong, but you'll start discovering how hard it is to make things belong. Over here we have a sign, a woman, and an eagle, and a temple that come from different locations and places. She was in front of the ocean. This was in some other place. I don't know exactly. Wasn't it? Or was that part of the, no, oh, this is the photo that had that image in it. Okay. Yeah. The other one is the background that doesn't have the image in it. So this one, I was going to say, because he did a good job of bringing in the shadow, but actually, no, it's because that's the one that had it. And then the eagle. And so the reason things might not look like they belong has to do with lighting, and then how well the image is blended in or not to the new environment, right? So even if this was a good or a bad cut or a good or a bad mask, it needs more help with lighting. If the lighting of this matches this, then it doesn't matter if the mask is or not so perfect, because we don't even look at it in detail to see whether it's right or wrong. So when you do put things together, if you have a choice to bring them from the same environment and the same time, you'll be better off. But if you're bringing things in like the ones I gave you, which are from different places, and even the temple from a different place, then you have to modify the lighting of the, choose one that's right. Say if you say that the lighting that's right is the one that's in here, and then notice that the shadow, the light is coming from here because the shadow is falling over there. You see that? So you need to look where the sun and the shadows are. And then you look at this woman and she's not lit from the side. She's kind of lit from the back and from there. And so that's the biggest giveaway, that this doesn't match in there. So I'm wondering if she were flipped and put over here looking in that way, if maybe the light would also seem to be coming from here and you'd be a bit better off. You know what I mean? That said, she would still need a bit more light in the front, on the back of her body, but in the front of the image, because this is well lit. But just as a simple flip where her eyes are looking that way and her hair in that direction might help this. And then over here, the lighting looks like it's coming from the top, because if it could be that it's coming from the side, but the shadows would be a little bit naked, but then you would have to maybe create a shadow for it here so it looks a bit more realistic. Okay. So again, I'm just saying, not that you have to do it, you're learning, but I'm just pointing out what things you need to keep an eye out, so that as you learn more tricks, then you come back to this one and go, oh, okay, now maybe I can do this, or maybe I can do that. And then the eagle had a color background original that looks very similar to the one that you have here. So it looks pretty good in this image. If you look at other people who put the eagle in a very different sky. So over here, the original eagle had blue sky, and this is a greenish sky. So this one is having more trouble blending in. And not because the mask might be better or worse. I don't know. I can't see the details, but just because even if this had a bad mask, and it might be a good mask or bad mask, but if it had had a piece of blue, it'd blend in better with this than it did with the green. Does that make sense? So again, it's a strategic choice to either change the color of the sky, or first change the color of the sky before you do the masking to have it match a bit more, and then bring in the eagle, right? So little things like that. But anyways, great job, you guys. Whoops. Great job, you guys, for, oh, and here it looks like you did a skew, right, Catalina? You used the transform and you skewed it a little bit, because it's the same eagle, but it's kind of been skewed or changed in the transform so that it has a bit of a different position. I'm not sure if you see it in big, whether it looks real or if it looks like it's like a bit of a monster. But yeah, that would be a valid way to do things. There's another tool I showed somewhere that's the warp. And Dan tried it out here. When I showed you the transform stuff, one is a warp. And then you could, I mean, in this case, he purposely made it do something really weird, but the warp tool might be something you might want to look into if you want to make it look like like the wings are flapping from a little bit higher or a little bit lower. So go to check out the transform tool and see other options that it might have if you want to change the way the bird is flapping. And then here, Mary Ellen brought the bird into the ocean. So you didn't cut out the human. What you did is you cut out the bird and brought it in here. And so again, even though you did a pretty good job cutting the mask, because you see very little of the blue that enhances it, there's a little bit here, but what gives it away is the transparency of those feathers. That's much harder to hide, because actual blue sky is transparenting, but if you take them out, then you take the bird's tails out, right? So then you literally have to sub-select just the tails and then try to, again, change the coloring a bit so that the coloring matches this blue sky. So none of you know how to do that yet. I'm not expecting you to do that. I'm pointing out things that you might need to start paying attention when you're trying to make it look like it's real. I mean, clearly you're not trying to say that the temple is in the desert, so that's fine. But even when you create these phantasmagorical kind of images that have no base in reality, it makes it look more real. Like this is really a place in a fantasy story if the lighting matches. Does that make sense? Because then you can really imagine a temple in an actual desert, even if it doesn't make sense to our knowledge of where a temple would be. We don't look at it immediately as fake. We just go, oh, what a dreamland that person built. Does that make sense? Because the lighting comes from the same place and it all kind of then becomes a bit more realistic. And in this case, Odessa, hi, thanks for joining us. Oh, she's here, but she's not here. All right. Well, Odessa, oh, there you go.
Hi,
So
I'm sorry.
no, that's fine. So just so you know, I didn't notice you weren't here at the beginning and I spent like 10 minutes talking about your image here. And then I went, oh, Odessa's not here. So go watch the first 10 minutes of the recording.
Okay.
Because I already spent a lot of time, but basically, awesome, great work in using all of the tools we've been learning, layer mask, adjustment layers, masking. I mean, very, very good application of the tools. And then that's when I noticed you weren't here. So then I stopped and I was going to mention a little bit about resolution and stuff like that. So when we go back to talk about that, I'll come back to your image.
Okay.
But I don't want to have everyone sit through all of what I already said about the image.
Thank you.
Okay. So great job, all of you who did do the homework and tried with different images, and the rest of you, if you didn't try, that's fine. Well, that's fine. You learn less, but that's fine. But if you did try and didn't think it looked good, and that's why you didn't post it, please don't ever hesitate from not posting just because, oh, it's not good enough or something like that. No, 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 no. I want to see it because these comments that I'm making, by the way, are in Odessa. Odessa, can you mute?
Okay, yeah, I'm muted.
It's not about being muted. You need to take the sound off. Let's see. I think that works.
Okay.
No, it's still there. You can, are you on is an iPad your second one?
A laptop and then my phone.
Okay, so then leave the phone on with sound and you can hear me through there. And then on the laptop, go to the audio button where you can mute and unmute yourself, and then click on the tiny little arrow on the right of the button, and then choose the choice, leave computer audio from your laptop. That way you don't have that turned on at all. No, not video. I still want to see you. I mean, you can turn off your video if you want, but in the audio, next to the little audio, there's going to be a little arrow and the choice is to leave computer audio, but then leave your phone audio on, and then we won't have that feedback. Okay, so then when you talk to me, you need to unmute your phone because your phone is muted right now. So I can't hear you. So you unmute your phone and then I can hear you through the phone. Okay, so do you know how to mute your phone?
Yep, we got it. Thank you so much.
All right. Anyway, and so once again, I wanted to say that whenever I give examples, I don't want to be critical in a bad way. If you put in things that didn't work, I use them to teach the good and the bad, but not to say, oh, what you did is right or wrong. More like, oh, notice that the color here is different. So pointing things that you might want to pay attention to. Maybe you just didn't have the knowledge yet of how to make a good mask or the knowledge of how to change colors. That's fine. I'm teaching you how to begin to look at images and see where things can be changed or improved. Okay. So if you ever feel like I'm targeting what you did and that's why you don't want to post this, please don't take it that way at all. I am so happy that all of you who posted things showed me your layers, showed me your work, showed me your masks and everything. So as far as doing the homework, you guys totally, all of you accomplished the homework very successfully. Okay. Oh, and then Moni down here, who's not here yet, but she had done this after class, so that's why it's kind of buried down there. But she put another photo that she has from another one of my classes, and then she merged that building, which is in Santa Barbara, it's up on Mountain Drive. Then she merged that to the road, and then to the road she merged the landscape, and on the landscape she put the dog and the bird. She basically put everything. But the one thing I want to highlight, she made a little shadow for the eagles. You see that? And it seems like a tiny detail, but whoa, it really helps us believe that that eagle is there. I don't believe that that road is ending in this road. That looks weird. I might not believe that. The lighting, that has no light, and da. But I definitely believe that eagle is flying low over this. Why? Just because of the shadow. Okay, and if you look at that, there's a shadow. Now, this shadow is a bit further to the right, and this one a bit further to the right. Maybe they need to be, you know, further to the right. And then when you look at this house, it's in shadow, which means the sun is kind of coming from there, which makes sense if this eagle's shadow is in front, that the sun is coming from back there. So you see how it begins to be a little, and then the dog has a shadow also kind of a little bit from that direction. So it's such a tiny thing. And then the light is hitting the side of her hair. And by the way, Moni many times created these kind of things before. And as I commented on these things, then she takes the class again and again, and then she goes there. So I'm not saying that this is perfect, but it's picking up on these cues that then you keep working on the stuff and then you begin to make them be more and more realistic. Okay. So you oversee how she did the curb shadow, the puppy shadow, the eagle's shadow. She was working on that, and they're fake. She just had to create them herself. And yes, you probably don't know how to create them yourself yet, but that's all the point I'm trying to make. Okay. That you just slowly build in the expertise to bring more realism to your image, which is still, by the way, let me go back here, is still, oh, where was it? Here. It's still not realistic. I mean, that house does not exist in this place. And at first glance, you can tell that that would make no sense, because in particular, this ends in a way that no road ends. Yet, other than that, if this wasn't there and you had a different background here, this would begin to be looking much more plausible because she got the lighting right from all the different angles. All right. Cool. Great job. Keep working on it. I'm gonna stop my share, and I want to make sure that I got the everyone in the chat that you got the link, because when you show up a bit later, the chat starts from when you show up, and there's the link again to the Padlet, so that everyone has the link to the Padlet. And before I continue, Moni had a question that I tried to answer, but she's not here. So when she comes in, she also asked some questions in the Padlet. So you can do that too. And then Rebecca said she wanted to learn how to flip the head and how to turn it around. So when we go in there, I'll show you. But anyway, any other questions that you guys might have based on things that you did or didn't do, things that worked or didn't work before we start on some new stuff? Nope. All right. Then let me reshare my screen and let's head over to
I
Blue.
do have one question real quick.
Oh, okay.
And you might be addressing it later, but I had trouble colorizing in Photoshop. Is that something that you would normally take out to Lightroom or something like that and
Oh God,
colorize?
no. The other way around, the best place to colorize is in Photoshop.
Okay.
It's much better than Lightroom for colorizing. So no, it's just probably you just need to learn the tools. That's all.
Okay.
But yeah. Now today, one of the things that we're gonna do in Photoshop is use the tools that they're the same ones that Lightroom has. So Lightroom has a set of tools, and Photoshop has the same tools and more, right? But they are in a different place. And in Lightroom, they are the tools that Lightroom has. It's what we call the raw tools in Photoshop are just the tools used in Lightroom. So when people ask what's the difference, Lightroom is purely for photographers, nothing else, no other kind of art, no other kind of, you would never do any of these like composites or that kind of stuff. And a lot of us don't do composites in real life, by the way. So when I teach you these masking features and stuff like that, it isn't because I want roller skates in front of a house. It's because with those masking features, you get to learn how to then carefully isolate an eagle and give it a shadow, which is still a composite, but then you carefully isolate the lips of a person and make the lips a little bit redder. So that's not fake, but it's the same exact tools with which you put an eagle on top of whatever, on top of a desert, right? So I don't actually do in my art any composites ever, but it's the tools. The easiest way to teach them to you is by making you do them on these different things. But then I apply all of these things that I've been teaching you to real photos. Now, when you do photos and nothing else, you use Lightroom. it's usually good only if you're a high, I mean, not good. It's usually more useful for people who are high-end photographers, meaning they take 1,000 pictures per shoot. And so then it's easy to handle, 500 photos at a time. And all of them are from the same moment. You're at a wedding, the lighting's the same, and you just kind of boom, you adopt something and you do it to all 10. You can do that also in Photoshop, but that's what Lightroom is made for professional photography. A lot of people who are just now and then photographers use Lightroom, and it's probably not the best use of their time and space because there's so much other complexity that has to do with work processes that really are based on being a full-fledged photographer. And if you're not, then it's like you're using 1% of the possible tools that Lightroom has. That said, when you use Photoshop, you're probably also using 1% of the use rooms that Photoshop has. But with Photoshop, you can also do a lot of other stuff, including film, video, sound, animation, warping, and all of the raw tools. That is what Lightroom has as well. The only part that Photoshop doesn't have is the catalogs where you organize things. And that's why we use Bridge. And Bridge is where we do all the organizing and cataloging when you use only Photoshop. Now, out in the real world, the best use of these apps, if you're a professional artist, designer, photographer, if you're a photographer only, is you use Lightroom up until you reach the limits of Lightroom, and then you move into Photoshop. You fix it in Photoshop and you bring it back into Lightroom. So you still need Photoshop. But if you're a designer of any other type and kind, an artist of any other type and kind, and a photographer who travels and wants to make your picture bigger, then you basically sit with Bridge and Photoshop and you don't bother with Lightroom because it has stuff that's just unnecessary to you. As much as you might never animate anything in Photoshop and that's unnecessary to you, but Photoshop has it all, okay? Has both options. All right. So this here, well, let's go to Bridge, right? And we have, let me stop. Last week, we ended where I began to show you the, here, let me go back here so that I can remind you through this. When I began to show you how to distort, transform a shape, but mostly when we got to the place where we made more or less, well, here it doesn't look like you got it very distorted, Odessa, very different. But when you make it bigger and smaller, the goal of the task was to show that the one that you transformed would have lost quality. And in this case, I'm not seeing that loss of quality. So you must have not completed, so to say, when you make something smaller and bigger and smaller and bigger, nothing happens until you commit that change by pressing go. That's when all the pixels disappear. And then when you try to make it a bigger again, the computer has to invent. And that's when you get the quality change.
I wondered why it
which is
didn't
this one,
change.
right?
Yeah.
Because while you're moving up and down, you can do anything you want. And it isn't until you actually commit that. And then the Photoshop goes, okay, I'm going to make this really tiny. I'm going to get rid of all the extra pixels. Then when you're trying to make it big, the computer's like, whoa, we need pixels again. And it invents them because the others are gone. And then you get this, but then what you probably did is you made it small and big without that committing. And that's why yours are not showing the difference. So I did this as an introduction to how we're going to use smart objects. And I left you with that file that I had you make a layer that said smart object. If you have that file with you, then let's open it up. But I'm actually thinking that I might not have that file with me because I just shifted some stuff. Do I have it here? Oh, yeah, I do. Random object resize PSD. So I've done some other stuff in between, and that's why I have it. So if you did that and you have this file, give me a yes. And it's the one where we were moving things up and down. And I don't know what you called it originally. It was called layers, random objects, and then I called it resize. And I had us do the original puppy. Then this was that free transform where things got blurry. And then I had you make a a layer called Smart Object. And if you do have it and you open it and have it ready to go, give me a yes. Basically, when you open Photoshop for the first time, it shows you images that you can work with, or you can go up to Photoshop, File, Open Recent, and then you can open the recent ones in order of that was the most recent, the next most recent, and so on and so forth, from whatever you have been doing lately. And so if you remember the names you might have called it, you might be able to find it there. So once you find it, please give me a yes. And those of you who did this as homework, then you probably have it too, because all of you who weren't here yesterday already did the homework, so that's good. So go ahead and open it. And by the way, I know, Moni, that you can't respond, but you said if you said you're listening, I was also talking about your image before you arrived. I commented on this Padlet image and stuff over here. So if you weren't here for that part over here, then go watch the recording because I talked quite a bit about it. Anyway, okay, so it looks like most people have found it. Mary Ellen has found it. Odessa, Moni. Okay, you guys found it. Okay, good. Then that's good. We can continue from there. Otherwise, we can recreate it. But if you found it, it's much easier. All right. So let me just really quickly show this to everyone to remind you about transformation, and then Odessa gets to do it again. But just so everyone remembers, I'm going to grab the original. This puppy, let me just call it puppy/original, so we know not to change it. I'm going to duplicate this layer. So who remembers how to duplicate a layer? What do I need to do to easily duplicate this layer?
Is it Option and drag?
Option and drag would be, and that's what we do in Illustrator stuff when you have an actual object selected. If we had this selected, it would work, but we don't have it selected. So it's more like a layer, not the object that I'm copying. And so it's something that it's a bit different. It's okay. It's Command or Control J. Exactly, J. And there's
right.
no reason to remember that one because, you know, Command J, where did that come from? So you just need to like know it. There's no mnemonic way to know why. That one's just Command J. That said, for people who don't like remembering those things, you can also right click on it and say duplicate layer. Right? So when you do that though, you get a little thing in the middle that says, is this what you want to do? And you get to say yes. And there you go. That's the new one. Okay, so right click,
Now my mask
duplicate layer.
Okay, right?
Or Command J. I'm having you duplicate your original, so your original shouldn't have a mask.
Okay, you're right. I'm good.
So we duplicate our original. It shouldn't have a mask. Let me clean your answers. And then we're going to go ahead, and for those of you, the old-fashioned way of doing the duplicates, by the way, oh, I didn't want to change the name, so hold on. I wanted to keep the name change. You would see here where you have the plus sign where you make a new layer that's empty, where it's empty. Now we would drag this down to that plus sign and let go, and it would copy it. There's so many ways to do things in Photoshop that whichever way works for you works. Okay, so now in this original copy, we're gonna, and I'm gonna call it a different thing. We're gonna do what is called interpolation, right? So we're going to mess it up, so to say. Mess it up. And I'm just saying that so that later when you look at the names, you can tell that this is technically going to look bad. We're going to do a free transform. If you don't remember the shortcut for it, then where you get it is up from edit, and you need to have the select layer, the selection, and then you'd go over here to transform and free transform. So who was it who said they needed to remember how to flip things? Was it Rebecca? Then this might be a place where you might go to flip vertical or horizontal. Okay, there's other places where you do it other than the menus. For example, over here, like in this properties there, I could just flip it over there and it's flipping. Okay, there's a couple different places where you would flip it, and that's in the properties panel. But if not, it's a transformation. So it'd be under the transform tools. And this is all, and this is the warp that I mentioned that you could use maybe to mess around with the eagles And there's not much warping we can really do with this dog. So I'm just showing it to, oh, hold on. I'm going to turn this eyeball off, or later you won't see the warping. Just showing these things for you to play around with, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but that's the warp. And then when you warp, what's happening is that each time you move any of these points, and I normally don't show the warp, but since the student used it, he's not here today, but, and we're doing that, then you can make things change. So I'm going to grab this little thing, and I'm making certain things change. Now, it doesn't make much sense to make the snout longer or shorter, and it doesn't have the details to let me maybe move only the ears. So in this case, if I were to really want to make this ear transform or look different, I would have to isolate it with a mask and then transform only the ears. But there, that's what, you know, what was happening when you ended up doing like weird things or transformations. Okay. So a lot of the times cartoonish things for people with bigger ears, smaller butts, that kind of thing. So that's the warp. Okay. So I'm going to escape. I don't necessarily want to keep this. If you guys want to keep it, then give me another copy of the original, because I don't want that. But that said, had I isolated, I'm just doing this really, really, like, I'm not being careful with it. So if I isolate the ear and I copy that ear, see, I made a little Command J and I copied that ear, that little there is just the ear. Okay. Then if I go and warp the ear, and if I do it from the transform, it won't be the best transform, you know, again, because again, I can then make things happen. Oh, you're seeing the other one. Turn that eval off. I would have to mask this one here so that it disappears. Anyway, I'm just kind of showing you a couple things. If I do that warp and it's not enough to maybe make us look like the ear is coming down or something like that, like we can actually really now do something to that ear that's much more specific. So by the time I'm done, I could have it look like one ear, you know, is doing something weird. But I'm going to undo that because there's another warp. For those of you who really want to work on that, it's called puppet warp and perspective warp. So there's all these other warps. And then when you do that, you end up having, and let me show you for that same ear, look at how, woof, look at how many points you can warp now with the puppet warp. And this one's how you do animations, right? Because you might grab this and you might have, anyway, I don't have the time to teach you something that's not, but anyway, you'll put in a point and then and then you'll begin to put another point and then you have to move it. Don't apply. Let me undo that, Command 0. And if you were to be doing like a GIF animation, you could have those wings go up and down, and then you make a little animation of a flying eagle that you could do with a puppet warp. Okay, none of that is stuff that we're going to be using right now. So I'm going to go ahead and keep them as something cute, but down here and over here, I'm gonna get rid of the ear and I can delete layer from there, which I don't like because then I have to answer again, are you sure? And I have to say yes, versus deleting it just this way and then it goes away. Okay, so I kind of prefer taking it to the trash and then it goes away. All right, so back to where I told you to be. Oh, I need to turn it on. So the free transform that I told you to use the other day is this one. And in this one, you can call it up with a Command T. Everything else I've shown you, you have to come over here to find, including the transform, warp, distort, K-Respil one at a time. But the free transform, I prefer using Command or Control T. So I'm going to do that, Command or Control T, these little handles up here. And then in the homework, what we did is we went and made it really tiny, and not in the homework, in the class the other day, we made it really tiny. Okay, so go for that. And then this is the part that was missing, Odessa. You need to complete that, because if I now make it really big again, nothing has changed yet. I can make it humongous and nothing has changed yet. It doesn't change pixel wise until I actually commit the transformation. So if I make it really tiny, this time I'm going to make it even tinier. so that you can make the change will be much more visible. Very, very tiny. I have to either say done if you have a contextual tab, hit the return key, which is what I do, or go up to this check mark. That is like, I'm committed, boom. It's like I'm putting the ring on it, done. That has been transformed. And at this time, Photoshop has dumped all of the pixels that made that puppy. Now I say Command T again, and I now stretch it out. And now Photoshop is like, okay, I got to make this look like a puppy again. So let me invent some stuff. But again, it won't be done until I either say done or hit the check mark or hit the return key. And that's when your new image appears. And that's the one that we see. That is, this time I went so tiny that it got very, very distorted. Last time I had done a bit less, and so Photoshop did a good job. This time I left almost no pixels, so it really did a horrible job, okay? So that is how you transform. Either way, that's not good, right? And this is the one I did the other day, so when I go to 100%, it was much better than the one I did today, but it's still not good. So either way, we only want to transform downwards, what we call downscale, okay? Downscaling is good. Any version that you make smaller, Photoshop can do well. So that's when I said, make another layer called Smart Object. And if you haven't done that yet, please do so. So basically, we're going to turn the eyeballs off the others and keep only the eyeballs on this one. So the only thing that we're seeing is the one from our Smart Object. This is the good one, the good quality one again. So if you haven't done it yet, copy the good one, call it Smart Object. And now we have to make it into a Smart Object. One way to do that would be to go up to Layer, and then find the word Smart Object and then convert to Smart Object. That's one way to do it. I'm going to do that. And in the bottom of this little thumbnail, you'll see a little box appears. That's the only thing that tells that this is a Smart Object now. I'm going to undo that. And another place you can find that is up here under Filter, Convert. Oh, you don't see it. It's Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. And then it tells you, hey, this is going to be a Smart Object. You say, okay, that turns into a Smart Object. I'm going to undo that again. And then I believe, because I don't normally do this, you can right click and yes, convert to Smart Object. There it is. So those are 3 ways of converting this into Smart. There might be 3 or others, I don't know, but those are the 3 most readily accessible ways to convert something into Smart Object. All right. So what does this mean? Let's get an idea of how big this image is right now. And if we don't know how big this might be, I can head over here and notice that this is telling me that this, this dog, right? This guy, as opposed to this little moon, is 18 by 14. And when I look at the dog, it says that it's 20 by 28. And when I look at the car, it's 19 by 9, right? So that width, the top, and oh, sorry, width and height. I was reading that right. Width and height, 19 by 7 is the width and height of the car. You turn the eyeball off. So that's one way of knowing, right? And so in this one, it's 20 by 12 is the size of this puppy. And then the moon was 18 by 18, okay? So that's how many, what size it is. And it's in inches, which isn't really meaningful, but it just gives us a quote. So I'm going to remember 20 by 12, 20 by 12. What this means is I'm going to make this object smaller and bigger, and it won't interpolate. But what I can't do is go much bigger. So if I go beyond 20 by 12, it'll still be something that doesn't exist, and the computer's still going to have to invent. So the Smart Object is still going to not work if you're trying to make it bigger than it originally came in, okay? But if we do the exact same thing we did before to the transform, Command T, select your Smart Object, Command T, and now make it so tiny that it looks like an ant. I mean, you can't even see him. And if I go in, it's like the littlest thing you've ever seen. I've made it really teensy weensy. I hit now my done or my return or my check mark. That little tiny guy there is now less than an inch. See over there, that tiny little thing? He's just like minimal. In the context of my entire image, he's like puny. See that? This is the original one. Was this? No, that's the one this is the original one. Okay. The size he was, and look at how teensy weensy I made him. Smart object. Now I go, oh, darn it. I need to make him bigger again. Command T again. And now I make him bigger again, not going past the original size, but I'm eyeballing it. It's about yay big. And I hit return. And if I turn on my original, perfect quality. Does that make sense? Absolutely perfect quality. Because I've protected it. It's like I've given it a little force field. So when I made it tinier, Photoshop didn't throw away its pixels. It's just showing it to me smaller, but it didn't actually, and when I say physically, nothing of this is physical, but as physical it can be, it didn't grab pixels and dump them. It just shrunk that visually. Now, this one, which is the new one, I ended up making a little bit bigger, I can see. And if I were to make it much, 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 much bigger, anything bigger than the original, it is still inventing, I'm going to make it way bigger now. And that's when I could go in here into the numbers and make it bigger by name. So I'm going to say okay to that. And now let me move it around. If I was able to compare eye to eye, that is a little bit blurrier than that, but I would have to go a lot bigger for it to be horrible. This is still pretty good because proportionally, I didn't change it as much as before. So a little bit of bigger is fine. If I were to like really duplicate or, I don't know, 10 times its size, it would basically, you're interpolating. So this is bad. If you start with something really tiny, make it really big. But for the most part, it follows the rules of only do it as big as your original size. Let's go ahead and let's undo that last set of free transforms. And let's go back to in your history. And I'm always trying to teach you how to use the history. I want to bring it back to not having transformed the smart object. So if I start looking, layer, move, and when I get to convert to smart object, I did want to keep it as a smart object. So I click on that, but I want to get rid of all the ins and outs and ups and downs that I did. So I want to go back to its original amount. Okay. So at this point, if you ever want to make something smaller, definitely use a smart object and you'll be in here, that one, you'll be in great shape. If you want to make it bigger, yes, you can upsize. Before you upsize just a little bit and it would be horrible. Before, I mean 20 years ago. Then 10 years ago, it looked just bad. And then 5 years ago, it looked bad, but not so bad. And by now, it looks not too bad. Like the transformation tool is getting better and better and better at making things bigger, but it's not yet anywhere perfect. So if you need good quality, that's not going to happen. And that's when I went over here to this assignment. And I mentioned that the only issue here with bringing this image on top of that one is that the quality of the image on both is very different for it to look realistic because it was taken in the same spot, in the same or very similar spot, very similar place. That could have worked. But this one here, it looks like it's been the resolution is off. See how it has these halos around the elements? You have like a halo around any part that's a line. That's because it's been either ultra sharpened or made much bigger with a transform, or it's just completely out of resolution. And it's got a lot of JPEG. These are called JPEG artifacts, okay? So that's something that you will never be able to make the quality of this look as good as that, unless you make that look as bad as this, as far as resolution. And see how when I approach, this is still a pretty good Antelope Vista point. That's still pretty sharp, even though I'm approaching and everything is going a bit weird, but this one's really beginning to go completely off. And that's because this originally started already much worse in quality or in resolution than this one. So this could have been fixed if when you got this original one, instead of just transforming the image, or if it was much smaller, or it had already come from another JPEG. There's many reasons why that could happen, but one of them would happen if you did a transformation with it not being a smart object. Okay. All right. So, there's so many other things that a smart object is or isn't. But I'm going to explore those when we get into retouching. So for now, that's the main takeaway I want you to take from a smart object. We're going to go and use smart objects for retouching and for filters. So there's many other reasons we'll use them. But in this conversation that we were having of transformation, that's the only thing I'm going to show you. Okay. So let's go ahead and save that. And then we're going to close this image and we're going to work on something else. So first, in this case, if you take a screenshot of these two in comparison to each other, all you're going to show me is that basically when it's a smart object, the quality doesn't change, right? Versus how the quality did change. So maybe I'll do a screenshot like this. It's a bit better. Like that, showing that I'm looking at the smart object in the original and that the quality is good. And that would be the one to post now. Okay, so go ahead, and by the way, if you remember where to post, one more time. Last time I'll put the link. I think everyone was here already, so you should all have a link, but there's a link one more time in the chat. All right, let's close this guy. Let's head back to Bridge. And I'm not seeing any hands, any questions, so basically I keep going, but if you have any questions, Gerard, I think, Gerard, were you here last week? I know that sometimes you're here and other times you're not. I'm not sure. Anyway, so I'm not sure if any of that you had an image for. Let me know, but I haven't seen your posts in the Padlet, so I'm not sure if you're having questions or anything about it. So remember, guys, to please post things in the Padlet for me to see that you're.
Yeah, I was here last week.
All right.
It just had been swamped with work, so I didn't
No,
get to.
That's fine. Don't
homework.
worry. But I don't want homework. I just want the work done in class at this point.
No,
Homework
no,
is
I
exceptional.
posted last week.
Oh, sorry. I must have not seen it then. I apologize. I'm not gonna. Yeah, there it is, Gerard. Okay. Cool.
That's okay.
Sorry. Everyone did so much catch up on homework that this time last week is way down here. And I really appreciate that because that means that a lot of people have been doing that. But then in my brain, I look here and I think, oh, this must have been last week. And I forget that last week is kind of down there. So that was my bad. All right, Bridge. And again, I'm saying only because I want to offer support if people need support to help them. So before I continue with all the other wonders of Photoshop, which are myriad and multiple, I want to show you how to use another tool that is the one I was just talking about with Odessa that Lightroom has, which is only the raw, what we call in Photoshop, we call them the raw engine, the raw tools, Camera Raw. And before I do that, let me explain what a raw photo is. And 99.9% of all the photos that you will ever take in your camera are going to be JPEGs, right? So anytime you see something that's ending in JPEG, it's fallingstar.jpg, that some photographer might have already worked on it before they posted it. But if you take a picture, it comes out as a JPEG by default. This one is actually straight from a camera, and it has the file name the camera gave it, and it says .jpeg. These are straight from the camera. Many times you work on an image in layers and then you save it out again as a JPEG. So this could have been from a camera and then saved out. The whole point is JPEG is flat, one layer, and JPEG is a compression format. So something I want you guys to remember that when I have handouts for you guys, they're beyond the one that I kind of commanded you to read, which was the resolution one. I also have many others, and one of them is file formats. And what's it called? graphic file types. There we go. So when you look at this one, there's a big, good description of all the different file types. And if you're going to be solely a photographer, you might need so many, you might not need so many. Some of these are art and illustration, but definitely JPEG, PNG, GIF, this all comes from Photoshop, okay? Photoshop, and then down here we have TIFF and RAW, okay? So this is where you have the description of RAW and other stuff. So definitely most of these initiate in Photoshop, except for like specifically Illustrator vector files. There's like 2 or 3 of these that are not coming from Photoshop. But all of that is output files. Like you work them in Photoshop and you output them as all those things. Inputting into Photoshop, usually you'll have a JPEG from your camera or a RAW from your camera. A RAW image is something that in your camera, you need to specifically tell your camera if it has the capability to take RAW pictures, to save your image as RAW and not as JPEG, but it doesn't do it automatically. By default, all cameras click and give you a JPEG. So if you go into the settings of your camera and your camera can do RAW, which in my case, these are iPhone 15 photos. And yes, iPhone 15 can do RAW, iPhone 12 can do RAW. I don't know how far back it goes that you can do RAW. Then you get a RAW image. Actually, these aren't RAW, by the way. The ones that are RAW are going to have a different name. They're going to be, and here's where it gets confusing. I have a DNG, that's RAW. I have another DNG here, that's RAW. I have an ARW here, that's RAW. Sometimes I have many more RAW pictures. This time I seem to have mainly just DNGs and RAWs. Sometimes I have NEFs. Sometimes I have, so what I'm trying to say is RAW images can have many different extensions. And I believe RAW file formats, if I double click on it, here is the handout where you see a whole bunch of different extensions, and they are based on brand. So we have an ARW that was taken with a Sony camera. If you have an NEF, it was taken with a Nikon camera. If you have CR2, it was taken with a Canon camera. So as you can see, all of these extensions for RAW images will be different, which is suddenly really confusing because up until now we've had JPEGs for everyone. The world uses JPEG. And now we have all these different RAW extensions based on the cameras. The only one, DNG, is not from a camera manufacturer. Rather, it's from Adobe, okay? Photoshop uses, not Photoshop, Adobe created this extension so that all the rest of these operate a little bit differently, and I'm going to not go too deep into this, but if you use a Canon, for example, file, and you modify it in RAW, you end up with 2 files. With any of these, if you modify them in RAW, you end up with a file that's the photo and a file that's all the instructions of modifications. The biggest difference is that Adobe invented a DNG extension where both the RAW and the XMP file are in one container. So although that's just a technicality for you, all that matters is that this ARW, if I modify it now, when I'm done with it, I'll end up with 2 files. And it'll be hidden. You won't see the second one. So most of the times it won't matter. Versus this one, which is a DNG. When I modify it, the modifications will be wrapped into the same file as the image. It's a minor difference, but also this is universal because any camera can save as a DNG, and iPhones, Apple, which is not Adobe, Apple has adopted the Adobe, I'm sorry, I'm needing to put on the fan here because the sun begins to hit this time of day and it gets pretty warm. Here we go. So what's happening is that Apple adopted DNG. So if you take a RAW photo with your phone, it'll save as a DNG, and other manufacturers are beginning to adopt it too. So becoming a bit more like the JPEG. and that it's a bit more universal. Okay, what does having a raw file mean? It means that your computer, and over here I have two images of the same moment, and I'm trying to get them together to see in the same screen. This moment and this moment is a DNG, and this is a JPEG. So it's a very similar moment saved as a JPEG or saved as a DNG. That is a distinction that what it means that this photo has already gotten compressed pixels. So when I modify this one using the raw tools, it doesn't matter how I modify it, it's going to have less latitude for modification than this one will. Because when I shoot a JPEG, the camera, now it's the camera itself, compresses, squishes some of those pixels, especially in the extremes of darks and lights. And it adds a filter. It says, I'm going to make it a bit warmer. I'm going to make it a bit sharper. It also sharpens it. It does things to it so that it already looks better straight out of your camera. Like out of the camera, a RAW will look better. A JPEG will look better than a RAW. A RAW has not been modified by the camera at all. The pixels it has are the pixels it saw. And so it's going to be a much bigger file. So this one is 66 megabytes, and this one is 120. Is that 120 or 22?
The JPEG is 12.
Thank you. I'm looking, I need my other glasses. I was like, can't be 120.
I have my
20.
trifocals on. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I'm like, wait, that's wrong. So it's 12 megabytes. Okay. It has the same amount of pixels. See there, 7,000 by 5. Thank you. Someone else had to put on their glasses. Yeah, I need it. So this image is 12 megabytes with 7,000 by 5,000 pixels. And this image is also 7,000 by 5,000 pixels, but it's 66 megabytes. It is way bigger. And it's the exact same moment. I have many, many more opportunities to modify this one and get what I want out of it than out of this one, because nothing's been clipped out of it. But the negative is that if I take all my photos in RAW, I will fill up my phone and my computer and my camera's cards in tricks because they're so much bigger, right? So for better or for worse, if you're taking photos that you know you're going to want to work in Photoshop and Lightroom and whatever, yes, definitely take them RAW. But if you're just hanging out, you know, and taking photos just because, definitely turn the RAW feature off and take JPEGs because you get good photos out of it. I don't know if you can tell the difference. It's very minimal visibly on these two. Sometimes there's a very big difference, but this orange looks a bit brighter than this one. Like it's just a tiny difference right now. When we open them, you'll see more differences, but even then you can see that there's a bit more color to this one than to this one. So usually RAW pictures are, or to start with, not as good. So if you're not going to modify your things in Photoshop, then you might as well always use JPEG, because RAW images have to be post-processed to make them look good. Okay. So it's a waste of taking RAW if you're not going to modify or process them. So don't take 100 photos in RAW that you care about if you don't want to process 100 photos. All right. Post-processing means this, post-processing then in Photoshop. All right, so let's go ahead and open this JPEG first for a second, the JPEG version. And if you double click on a JPEG, it opens in Photoshop. Duh, we've known that. It's what we've done all this time. All right. Let's close it. Let's go back to Bridge, and now let's double click to open DNG. And I double click and open the DNG. Instead of opening, and let me turn this off in case you don't have it. Instead of opening in, and I need to make this a little bit bigger to fit. Hold on. The window that you guys are seeing. Then instead of opening in Photoshop, it opened in what's considered the Camera Raw tool, the Camera Raw engine. And some of you, if you've never opened it before, you might be getting a big old welcome, update to Camera Raw, you know, that kind of message. So you need to say yes, okay, and all of that. If you've opened in Camera Raw and your phone looks like this, your computer looks like this, then give me a yes. Okay. You don't need to do this. By the way, I'm going to cancel that. You stay where you are. But I just want to say that, does that mean that I can't process JPEGs for Camera Raw? No, of course you can. But you would right click and say open in Camera Raw, and then your JPEG opens in Camera Raw. Okay. The only difference is that you already are starting with a less latitude in your colors. Over here, it tells me that this is the JPEG. I'm going to cancel because I don't want us to work on that one. I want to work on that. But meaning, yes, if you never took raw images, don't worry. You can still use these tools, but you need to right click and open them in Camera Raw. Tell it instead of just double clicking. That's all. All right. So now I've got the same one that you guys did. And over here, it's telling me that this is the DMG. It tells me what camera took it. In this case, it's an iPhone. And on the right side, I have a bunch of tools, which for those of you who are wondering about Lightroom, these are the tools that Lightroom has. And it lets, I mean, there's slight differences, by the way, and stuff like that, but it's basically the Camera Raw. If you guys have a Photoshop Essentials version, which is like a one-stop amateur version of Photoshop, that one also has Camera Raw. There's a couple different tools that have Camera Raw. And
this is what I was looking for.
yeah, exactly. That's why I said I'm going to show you today how to do that. And then I'm going to cancel that for a second. You don't cancel. But even when you're inside of Photoshop, I'm going to open this one again. You can get to the Camera Raw filters up here inside of Photoshop Pure. And I'm going to show you that a minute later. So you can access Raw in a couple of different ways. The cleanest or purest way is just to double click from Bridge and open it that way. And now I'm going to stay here anymore. I was just showing you different options, but now I'm staying here. And I'm not going to keep getting you dizzy about different ways of doing things. I usually have people of different levels of knowledge in class. So when I show you 3 ways to do something, for those of you who are new to this, just kind of cover your ears and go, la, 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 la. I just want to learn one. That's fine. Learn one. But some of you who've done this for a while, you might go, oh, thank you for showing me that one too. And Shape, you showed me that one too. And that's what I want. I don't want to confuse you. I want to just provide you more information. You're welcome to just ignore that bit of information and continue along the path of 1 is enough. Thank you. I don't need 20. All right. So here we go. We are in Camera Raw and we are going to process this image. And by the way, again, one more thing to show you is that if I were to open again, 2 or 3 different images at the same time in Camera Raw, and well, I don't, I shouldn't. Then you can open 2, 3, 10 images down here, and you'll see a strip. And so that's why Lightroom does this well, and here it does the same, and that you can open. You have no idea how many of these photos I took. I took bazillions, different versions. I could open all of them at the same time, right? And then when I do that, I'd have them all here in a strip, and then all I need is to process one, and then I apply those changes to all 25 of the ones that I've chosen, and then I don't have to open 25 of them. Does that make sense? But right now, I only brought one of each here. I'm talking one of each. Yes, I brought the JPEG for comparison, but I mean, in that moment, I took 20 different raw files of the sun. I went and got the trees, not the trees. Yes, the ocean, you know, I did different things. So they all have the exact same lighting, unless a lot of time went by and I started at the 4 p.m. and finished at 6 p.m. Then it might need different stuff. But for the most part, I would be able to process them all at the same time. Okay. So, so here we are. Here we have our good old image in Camera Raw. And whoops, I didn't mean to necessarily hit that. And you can, in this one tool, work with light, color, effects, curve, color grading, detail, sharpness, optics, blur. You can do a ton of stuff at the same time. If you open one of these arrows, you have all of those tools. If you close it, you open these arrows, you have all of those tools, you close it. So this is like a packed set of tools. You also have these tools here that let you do even more. You can do some masking. Oh, Rod the Lightroom and RAW didn't have, Lightroom has these tools and RAW is in all these other programs. So it's the same thing. Didn't have masking until a short time. They had a very little bit of masking that was very minute and basic. The last year, Adobe made a big change and now has given some really good masking tools to RAW, which means Lightroom now has masking too. Before you could only do the level of masking that we can do. We could only do it in Photoshop. That said, you can still do like 100% superior masking in Photoshop. If what RAW has doesn't enough, you definitely need to continue into Photoshop, because then you can just, really go crazy with masking. But now at least I could say, well, I'm going to mask the sky and only change the river. I wanted the river and not the sky. Before you couldn't do that. So that's all in these tools over here. All right. So this is an all-in-one fix-it kind of thing. And you might go, well, there's nothing to fix. Oh, trust me. Yes, fixing, we talk about it as in something's wrong. But no, we're not talking something's wrong. Many times that you have to fix something's too light, too dark, too bright, but it's just enhancing it. Post-production is just enhancing it in one way or another. And I can enhance this image in so many different ways. Before I do anything else, let me see what the computer thinks. So at the very top, I have this button that says auto. Let me hit auto. Did you see much of a change? I'm going to turn it off by hitting auto again, and then auto and auto. So if you can really see, it's kind of a minute amount of change. But in reality, as far as change concerned, it's not so minute. When we're making changes, it changed the lighting mainly. It kind of went a little bit brighter. Okay. So if you can't see it, turn it on and off and on and off, and that'll show you a little bit. Now, to see what the computer did, let's open the light and look at these sliders and then hit auto again. And see how it did move those sliders a little bit to the right or to the left. So that's a pretty small change. And it's just what the computer thinks you need to do. The computer doesn't know if this is a sunset, if this is a pot of coffee, if this is a portrait. It has no idea. It just looks at the lighting, tones, and it tries to make everything fit as best as it thinks it should fit without real knowledge of what you're trying to do. So I would recommend sometimes hit auto first to see, when you're beginning to learn how to do things, to just see what the computer suggests. But that doesn't mean that it's what you need to do. It's just one of many options, but it also begins to give you an idea of things. Sometimes you have no idea where to start, so that helps. But I recommend just after that, turning it off and working from there. Or if you like what it did, sometimes it goes the opposite way. It does something you don't like. But if you like what it did, then you leave it there and then you continue from there to work on different things, right? And we're going to move all these things ourselves. But since we're learning right now, I'm going to go ahead and tell us to not do that. We're going to say, don't turn the auto on, turn it off. And let's start with 0 so we can begin to see what these things do to this image. First of all, you can also turn it quickly into black and white. And then I'm going to turn that off. And then there's this thing called HDR. If I turn it on or off, it seems to be doing something right there. See, that's mainly where you see it. For some images, you don't see any difference. For some, you do. And HDR has to do with when you have an image that has huge contrasts between light and dark. So say you take a picture, if this had been daylight and I took a really nice picture of the river, maybe my sky would have gone white, right? It might have just had lost its color. So then in the camera, if you turn on HDR, it would try to do a better balance of lighting. And if you don't, then you can try to do that here in Photoshop. Right now, I'm going to leave all the automatics off. And I'm going to just go with us learning what these things do. Over here, it tells you the type of profile that your photo is in. I don't use this. I have to admit, I don't use this too much, but for some people, this is like the only way they like to work. Hold on, I lost my mouse. There we go. I did something weird and I lost my mouse. Over here. So without doing any other changes, you could go, well, this is what my phone said. Let's see what Adobe Vivid says. And look at how much this has changed. Big change. Is it right or wrong? I don't know. It's just a different opinion. Okay. I seem to, whenever I'm doing this, it seems to be taking me out. of this mode. Then Adobe Landscape. This is a landscape after all. And this is what it thinks I should do. And remember that we had started with Pro Raw. This is what the camera saw, right? It seems like I need to move in and out each time. And then when I go over here and straight to landscape, this is what. So see what a big change it did this time? I don't know what the computer is reading that it suggests that's what I should do. Maybe it thinks, oh, this must be really dark in the moment, and that's why you need to do it and do that. Whatever, you can play around with these and see if you find one that you like and start from there. I need to minimize each time I do a change in there. I'm having a weird, give me a second here. I'm just having some issues with my display. Let me stop my share. All right, so I don't know why my display was doing some weird stuff. Let's see. I hope it's been fixed now. All right. So now I'm going to keep this in the one that we started, but you can play around with these and see if you want to start from there. Just because I want to start from 0, I want everyone to go back to Pro Raw, because that's where we're starting. See, every time I change it, I go out as if I'm going out of my, never mind, I can fix it, but still, this is really uncomfortable because I made a change and now I can't.
Hey, Diana, on my screen, I
Yeah.
keep having to adjust my color histogram because I'll get the blue shading or red shading.
That's
that-
different. That's these two little
extreme level.
guys. Yeah, that's these two
Well,
little
no,
guys, but
down from the bottom of that same histogram, is it the same control where you can
yeah,
bring it in or out?
yeah, but hold on. I can't do anything until my computer, right now, my computer is not,
Oh,
every time I share, it messes
well,
it up.
it's not a big deal. I remember in one of your other classes, we'd gone through all that, but I just was
Yeah.
saying it's interesting that depending when I change profiles, it'll do
Yeah,
like the
because
dark trees, it'll light them up as blue because
exactly.
it's out of
So
it's
here,
out of the visible range.
what
or
he's
something.
what he's talking about, and I'm going to teach you, is if these things are turned on, and depending on what you're doing here, you're going to get either a bunch of blue stuff like that, or a bunch of blue stuff and black stuff like that. I'll tell you what that is in a minute. Right now, just the only reason you're seeing those, if they bug you, turn this, click on this on and off by clicking on them, and they'll disappear. And then I'll show you what they are, because they're not necessarily something that I want on right now until I teach you what they are, and then I'll want them off. So that's what turns them on and off, that and that. Okay. And yes, definitely it'll be different because you're changing the lighting over here. So once I explain this again, then you'll understand why they change when they turn it on. All right. So this is as raw as it gets. This is what the camera saw. If you took the picture, you can decide whether this is what you saw too. But if you didn't take the picture, you won't know, right? So post-processing is the part where it gets artistic, because what is real, what is right, what is correct? Unless you were there, many times you look at a picture and you go, oh, that's so gorgeous. And you have no idea the photographer worked 20 hours to make it look that way. And other times it's truly what was there. I can make this photo, as you already saw, look very different according to what I do. So nothing is right or wrong, but there's better and worse. Of all these tools, the exposure and the contrast work globally. The exposure is the first one, and I'm going to show you that if I move things to the right, things look brighter, and they don't necessarily look worse. They kind of look like if this was, when you kind of come out to the sun and you don't have glasses and everything kind of looks too bright. And then as we keep going, it really looks completely overexposed. But one thing, when we do that, we discover that actually there was quite a lot of detail in here that the camera did capture, sticks and stones and stuff, that when we were somewhere in the middle, we kind of thought they didn't exist. See that? It's like, oh, well, there's a discovery. And if you do want them to be seen, then you need to do something about it, because in the basic setup, and to go back to the middle, I'm going to double click this little arrow right there, double click, boom. This is what the camera considers as midpoint, so to say. And you can barely see these guys, right? I'm clicking with my mouse and you can barely see these guys. So it took you doing that to go, oh, wow, those were there. Okay, double click. And then if I go down to the left, I make it darker, darker. And in this case, clearly it just darkens it to the point. But sometimes you overexpose and you need to darken it so that it looks better. In this case, you can decide if you want it better or smaller. I don't want us to make any choice right now. I want everything to go back to the middle so we explore each slider. But what happened here is that when I say global, every single thing got either lighter or darker. Even if it was supposed to not get lighter or darker, you don't have a choice. It's the whole thing that you went lighter, the whole thing went darker. So rarely, unless you took a really bad shot, do we need to change exposure too much. At most, you might touch it a degree one way or the other, but normally this one kind of stays put and we work on the others, which are much more nuanced. But I do want you to look up here at the histogram. Remember Gerard said histogram? This is the histogram. And the histogram is pretty interesting because just don't look at my mouse over here. Just watch my histogram. I'm going to go to the right and you see how my histogram is shifting and I go to the left and my histogram is shifting. So do you see how it's dancing back and forth? What the histogram is it's telling me what is happening in the photo. It's telling me these are my black pixels. These are my white pixels, and these are my middle-ish pixels. So it's telling me that I have a lot of dark pixels. This is middle gray. This is shadows. See the word, and I can never point to it. I'm going to make a drawing of where it shows up, because the moment I draw it, it disappears. But over here, keep an eye on that. Okay. And now let me go back to Photoshop. When I hover in the middle, it says exposure down there. And when I go to the left, see how it says shadows down there? And when I go further left, it says blacks. And that area that I can't point to, it says blacks, shadows, and exposure. When I go to the right, it says highlights or whites. You see that? These are how many white pixels I have, and the height indicates more or less. So I have a lot, very tall, a lot of dark black tones, and, very low amount of shadows, what it considers shadows, bit more of the middle tones. This says exposure, but it's basically the middle tones. Then over here, I'm beginning to have a few more highlights, and then I go up in the whites over there. So basically, this is a pretty darkish picture, and it's true. I only seem to have a couple of streaks of light tones and a lot of dark stuff. So this is just describing what I have. All right, we're going to ignore the highlight, that for a minute, the image, but go down here and notice that this says highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. Right? Shadows, highlights, whites, and blacks. That's describing that. So if I move any of these sliders, I'm only going to move the pixels that are in that area or in that area, but everything else around it will be affected. So for example, if I grab my blacks at the very bottom, there's a lot of blacks in this image, so it's going to make a difference. If I make my blacks go to the right, what's happening to my blacks? It's kind of like a bit of a difference. I'm lightening them up a little bit, right? And if I look at my histogram, now pay attention to that. I'm moving my blacks to the right, and see how they went from being really black to kind of beginning to approach the shadows. I'm lightening the blacks. I'm going to double click. Instead, I'm going to move them to the left, and my blacks became absolute black, complete black. There's nothing there. If I try to see the detail, it's gone. There's like zero detail in there. And so this is called that my blacks are getting clipped. In the photos, you always want your blacks and your whites to have some detail. You don't want pure paper white of the photograph paper, and you don't want, which there's no ink, and you don't want all the inks together giving you pure black, because then there's no texture. And a photograph shouldn't be a flat black here. It should have some texture. So when you click on this little guy there, that's on top of the histogram, and you did something like that, it's warning you, whoa, whoa, everything that is blue is getting black without detail. It's called clipping the tones. You went way too far, okay? So this is a good indicator of what might be way too far. I'm going to turn it off again, but another way to turn it on and on is to hold down the Option key when you slide, and then you're getting some other indicators there of what's good and bad. But right now, let's just say that if this is on, when I start going back down, it begins to tell me, okay, those are black and the black is good. So I did go down. This was the middle. I can go down and make the blacks a little bit blacker. And when I start seeing some of those blue markings right there, there's a tiny, because this was on, that tells me to stop. I don't go much further than that, because then my black is going to get kind of muggy and muddy. This is as black as it gets, which means that everything lighter than these 4 little dark dots is going to have some tone and some texture. If you need to see this at 100%, which you do, you go over here to this arrow and click on 100%, and my image, I'm having the same issue I had before. When I make certain changes, it freezes. Oh my God. I lost my tools again. Why is it doing that? I'm gonna have to stop my share and do it again, because it just completely, for some reason, the redrawing, I'm gonna have to do it without sharing and then start again, which is bizarre. So there we go. I chose my 100%. And when I did that, and I'm not gonna choose it, it zooms in. And now I can actually move my mouse and make it go in and out more, which before I couldn't. Something weird's happening. And not sure what. It's not letting me move. This is very frustrating. I can't move down to the part that I want to show. It just lets me zoom in and out. I have no idea why I'm having these issues. Anyway, I'm trying to move down to that part of the image and I can't. So the only solution is going to be to go back to fitting. And again, it works when I'm not sharing. What about Zoom sharing is making this not work? I don't know, but I'm going to just have to fix it and then share again, because it just won't do it when I'm sharing. All right. The moment I stop sharing, it all works again. It's so weird. Anyway, so if I had been able to go to 100% on this thing, you would be able to see that you see some of the twigs and stuff. Okay. So that might be the most I want to go with black. Now I'm going to double click to bring it to the middle. Let's do that with the whites. If I go to the right with the whites, whoa, this one is making a big difference. I'm making the light colors much lighter. Look at over here, how much is moving. Whoa, saw that? There's a huge shift in my histogram. And my whites are becoming so white that if I print this photo, this will be just paper with no ink. It's definitely paper without detail. So again, if I turn on this time, the white indicator, the clip warnings, then when I move to the white, it's warning me, whoa, that's way too white. And if I double click and bring it to the middle, it's already warning me that I have some whites there, even in the original exposure. And that has to do with the whole HDR or not. And I'm not going to go there right now. So even in my camera, I left areas that are too white. So maybe now I might need to bring down the whites a little bit. Okay. And now I don't have exposure that's wrong there. My whites, even straight from the camera, I'm gonna turn this off, have some pieces there of white that is going to print just paper white. So I want to bring some texture in there. And that's when I move this down. But it's hard to see how much down is right unless I turn on these clipping warnings. Very helpful to show me that all I need to do is go about yay, and then that works. Okay. And so my black had to go a little bit to the left of my white. Now what I've done is I put my whites at the extreme of white, the blacks at the extreme of white, black. That means I don't have any flat blacks and I don't have any flat whites. And that's a good place to start from. But then that doesn't mean that I like what's happening in the rest of the picture. So then I can work with my highlights and shadows to move the rest of the tones that are inside of it in and out. I'm going to just double click to bring this back to 0 so that you can see individually how each one of these are affecting the image. And I'm going to turn this feature off again. And now I'm going to go over to highlights and shadows. So shadows is basically, this picture is mainly shadows. And so when I move my shadows, look at what a difference it makes, right? It just goes all the way to looking, well, maybe kind of like what my eyes were seeing, because our eyes have a huge latitude. And even though it was dark in this image, I wasn't seeing black here. I was clearly seeing dirt, you know, when you're there and it's like, this is probably more realistic to what I was seeing. And that sunset is probably a bit more realistic to what I was photographing. When I double click, this is what the camera shows. That doesn't mean that I was sitting in pitch dark taking this picture. If I move my shadows to the left, then it's making my darks turn into black. And that's why it's good to have had those warnings. I'm going to double click to bring it back into the middle. So if I want to make this lighter or darker, right, it will depend. I'm taking all the clippings off for a second. It'll depend on how I want to interpret this image. Do I want to show them, hey, what my eyes saw? Do I want to make it more dramatic? If so, do I want to make it much more intense or not? That's a choice. I'm going to bring back to the middle, and then I'm going to go to the highlights. And again, I have a lot of changes. As you can see, these are not global changes because when I move this back and forth, my blacks aren't shifting. But there still is a bit of a shift, right? Because this gets affected a teensy bit. So you always have to keep an eye on all the colors because you might have moved your shadows a bit to the left. And then when you go down here, that affects the whites, et cetera, et cetera. So rarely do we use them on their own. We use them in conjunction to each other. Right now, as a teaching tool, I'm using them on their own. And then we go back up to the top. This one is global, and contrast is global only in that it chooses a middle point and it says, anything that's light is going to get lighter. Anything that's dark is going to get darker. So it's going to force contrast to the right. So if I move it to the right, my black stuff got blacker and my light stuff got lighter. And if I double click and if I go to the left, and I'm extremely going to that, my light stuff got less light and my dark stuff got less dark. So it kind of made it more muggy. I'm going to double click. So from muggy to very contrasty. Okay. And back to the middle. Now, this is equivalent to having made my blacks blacker and my whites whiter. Only here I get to choose where I want to stop them versus, because it's equidistant. It's as if I had done this, equidistant. That's what that does. Versus if that's not what I want, then I get to say I want only this a little bit whiter and this a lot darker, or this a lot darker and this a little bit lighter, right? So I prefer using these four. Okay, now that you've seen what these four do, I want you to try to do what you think you want this image to show. Let me be clear. Post-processing is as creative as it gets once the photo has been taken, because this is when you get to choose what story you want to tell of this moment. Did you want to see bright colors? Did you want to see a very dark environment? Did you want to make this look like it's dawn? Did you want to make it look like it's, it's midday and there's no orangey colors? I haven't got into color yet. You can take the orange colors out of it and have it look like it's just a blue sky. You can make the blue look really blue, like midday blue, and then no one would think it's a sunset because there's no shadows here. So you're kind of lucky in that. When you have long shadows, then clearly it's sunset or sunrise. But this has no shadows, so you could kind of get away with making almost anything you want if you move these things around enough, and when you get into colors and other stuff. So you get to move this around to your heart's content until you think it looks good to you. And that's why I don't want you guys to move to the numbers that I give you here, nor to the numbers that the computer gives you, because that's just the computer story of things, okay? And it's not your story of things. So you might want to tell a different story of it. So now let's spend a little bit of time just using these sliders and moving it around until you all think that you like your picture. And I'm going to stop my share because when I leave this share up, everyone I see tries to make me happy by imitating my numbers or something. And I don't care. Your vision is different than mine of this photo. Even though I took it, your interpretation of it might be very different. So I'm going to go ahead and choose some settings that I think might enhance me. And if you want to make, the only thing I do want you to do, turn on those highlight clip warnings, because what I don't want is for you to make a lot of things to make it look good and bad or whatever, and you love it. And then if you didn't turn these on, suddenly you'll turn them on and discover that you have a whole bunch of black. That is not a good, that's where I'm saying there's a mistake or an error. That would be an error to have, unless you're trying to do those photos that are silhouettes where everything is black or white, then you shouldn't have a ton of pure black in your image like that. Nor if you go to the right, then you shouldn't have a ton of white in your image. So you definitely want to try to equalize your blacks and your whites. And the other way to know it for sure when you're learning, if you can't like tell on your own, is to turn these on so that you see, if you're not seeing anything when you turn these on, it's because you don't have any right now blacks clipped, but you turned it on so that when you do clip your blacks, you will see it. Okay. So once again, I'm going to stop my share, and with the warning that I want everyone to turn on their highlight, their clipping warnings, the lights and the blacks clipping warnings, then I'll let you all do whatever you want to do to make you like this image better. And you might see that you might work two and they look good. And then when you move another one, suddenly the clipping warnings appear again. You want to make it light, and then you can't. Because for better, for worse, this is still, even if it's highlights or shadows, it's still a little bit global. And what I mean by that, by saying it's still a little bit global, is that maybe you want the part of the sun to not get lighter, but you want the rest of the kite to get lighter, or vice versa, and that needs masking. This is not masking. This is all your darks and all your lights. Maybe you want the island darks to stay dark, but the front darks to get lighter. You can't do that. And these are all darks, but they're global. You would have to mask out the individual parts of the darks to make those lighter or darker. So ultimately, 99% of the time, we use masking to make an image like this really tell us what we truly want it to say, what we truly want it to do.
Padlet.
Yes, please. Thank you. Do a Padlet. And by the way, that's a good admonishment, because we're going to go on break now. So go ahead and give me your choice. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's just your choice. Some images you can move around a lot. This one has such extremes of light and dark that there's not that much movement you can do without clipping. When we go to a photo that's not so extreme, you'll see that there's maybe more that you can do with the highlights and the darks without clipping your stuff. So anyway, that's just a possibility. I'm going to go for a choice that I might not have made normally, but I normally want to go darker with sunsets, but just to do something different today, I'm actually going to do something that I have already processed this image to my liking somewhere else, and I'm going somewhere totally different right now because I feel like going somewhere totally different. All right.
Should we see your screen?
I'm not yet. Does anyone feel like they kind of, does anyone feel like they kind of like where theirs went? And if you're still working on it or not, let me know. But let me show you how to see the before and afters. Okay, because a lot of times you're like, well, is this better or worse? And then we'll take our break. So I'm going to share my screen. I want everyone to have done something. And normally I would have done something different with this one, just so you know. But this doesn't, I'm not unhappy necessarily here. By the way, I want you to see posting these things here. I'm seeing, okay, this is great. Look, already in these posts, look at how different these look. See that? Now, Odessa, I think you're using some color sliders here already, right? Is that true? That I haven't taught this group?
I am.
Yeah. So just so you know, I haven't shown you color. So you might be like, oh, I wanted more color out of it. I don't know how to get it. Well, she did that, but we'll get there after break, okay? But even then, the changes are already pretty obvious. So not everything looks the same just because you have the same tools. Over here, I'm trying to do something completely different where I'm actually lightening the foreground, which is something I would have never done. Because I thought, you know, whatever, that's what I really was seeing. And that wasn't, it's not as striking as good as before, but I'm trying something different. How do I see the comparison? I'll go down to this. Oh, by the way, this is straight. If I click on that, it goes back to how I started, and I click on it again, it's how I am. Started, and what I just did. I purposely made a change that's really obvious. Some of you might have a much more subtle change, but I wanted to make something really, really visible. And thus lightening all my front is actually very different. I'm beginning to see some green in my trees, which there was only black, right? I have some greens down here. I had no color when I opened this thing. The image had that. And that's the kind of thing where a JPEG might not be able to give me colors again. It might lighten the things and give me grays versus a raw preserved some colors there. And then over here on the left little button, if I click on that, then I can see next to each other befores and afters. Okay, this is where I started. This is where I am now. The thing is though, if I keep that, when I clicked on that, it looked like a little box and now it looks like this. So now I'm going to keep going on the first one that appeared and I'm going to keep going. And now it's giving me a different view of before and after. Left and right, half of the image on each side. Then I click again. Now it's giving before and after, top and bottom. I click one more time. Now it's giving me before and after. It's harder to see, but there's the line of before and after. And then the final click brings me back to just after. Okay, so I have to click 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to get back to working without seeing the before and after. Okay, you can modify that, but right now that's the easiest way to see the befores and afters. Another way, a real quick way, since we've only changed light, we haven't changed anything else. You see this little eyeball right there? You can press on it and hold it, and that's on and off when you let go. On and off to see the before and after. But when you do this and you have other things, then you will only be able to do before and afters of just that bit. You know what I mean? Not the whole thing. And you want to see what it looked like before I changed color or after I changed color. So then you will turn only that on and off. So those are all different befores and afters. Give me some screenshots. Ideally, give me something like this so I can see what you did of the before and after. Not because I want to say good or bad or criticize. I just want to see if you made any changes, period. And neither of the changes I told you already is right or wrong. It's just you're learning how to use the tools, okay? Then when you're done with a screenshot, go ahead and cycle back to after. Head over now to Safari and let's post that screenshot. Letting Vince in. So let's post that. I'm going to say before and after camera raw modifications. And I'm going to bring in that screenshot. And publish. Okay. So in Tiny, I won't be able to see it, but if I click on it, you can get a feeling for what's there. Okay. And then turn it off.
Now, when I click on the eyeball, it doesn't stay at my
No,
before.
you
long enough
hold
for
it
me-
down. No, you hold
Oh.
it down to see it, let go and it turns off. Hold
Okay,
it down, it turns off. It's just a temporary.
Then how did you
thing,
take your screenshot when you were holding it down?
Oh, I didn't. Instead of before and after like that, I clicked on this one to see
Ah,
the before
Thank-
and after next to each other. Okay. And that's the screenshot that I took. Okay, because all the others show you only the before or the after. That one shows you parallel next to each other. All right. Once you did that, we're not going to cancel, save, or anything. Oh, well, actually, you know what? This is a good point to say, you know what? Yeah, maybe we should do not say open, do not say cancel. Those do 2 different things. Just say done. Just say done. And what will happen right now when you say done is that if you go to Bridge, you will have the original image that we were working on will now have these little sliders there, which means that this one has been processed in Photoshop. It also means that there's a file connected to this if it's not a DNG. This is a DNG, so it's all in one, but if it's not a DNG, then it would have a hidden file, which you could unhide to see, which would be the one that is giving the photos instructions to look this way. And this one is the one that we are now working with, okay, which is the DNG. All right. If you look at these two together right now, what looked like a big difference, the only big difference I'm seeing right now is that in the JPEG, everything was black in front, and my change, because I wanted to see a change that I could really show you guys, I lightened the foreground, see? The tree is a little bit green, and this is light, and this is dark. Some of you guys have bigger changes or even lesser changes, but the changes are represented. When you say done, they will be represented in Bridge. You will see the changes that you've made, okay? All right. Let's take a break. What time is it? 2:46. So that one's easy. I'll see you at 3. Be back at 3 p.m. All right. See you guys in 14. All right. We're back. We're back. Or at least I'm back. Okay. Here we go. If you are here, either turn on your videos or give me a yes, so I know that you're there in the background somewhere. And here we go. All right, I'm looking at the posts and I see lots of postings. Cool. And there's only a couple of places where people have left some of that red or blue. But that said, don't despair yet if you still have a lot of that red or blue, because what we're going to do next will keep moving we'll keep shifting things around, right? So over here in mine, this is how it was before and how it's after. But after I work with color effects and other stuff, I might discover that somehow red or blue creep into this one again. Then I'll have to go back in and change again, maybe my whites and my highlights and stuff like that. Okay. So that's just part of the game. All right. Because nothing is done until it's done, so to say, in RAW. All right, let's go back to Bridge and let's not only open this one, but you know how sometimes I'm explaining something and some people already get it the first try, and other times I'm helping someone else and you want to do something else. You might as well go ahead and hold down the Shift key and also click on the one before that, which is another DNG. And then while we stay working on this one, if you want, you can go and apply and see what's happening to the other one that's a DNG when you do the same thing, and that'll help you see how to work with two at the same time. So if I now double click to open, since both were selected, then both are going to open up. Okay. Now that said, this takes up a lot of space. This film strip, this takes up space. One thing you can do is kind of drag it down to make it a little bit smaller before it disappears. If you drag it too much, it disappears. And then what you can do when you want to see it or not see it is just click on this icon, this one right there, and that turns it on or off, on or off. So have it like this, and then when you're ready to say, well, I want to work on the other one, then you do like that, you work on this one, and then you come back to this one. Does that make sense? You don't have to, there's other RAWs in there. You might want to bring up your own, but I'm just showing you. I don't want you to not focus on what I'm saying though, and start jiggling the other one and then have to ask for, can you tell me again what you said? So this is only if you really have, if you have no need to hear what I'm saying, if I'm helping someone move forward on something you've already handled. Other than that, please, I know that I'm in danger when I say that, because then I'll have people going, can you repeat that again 20 times? So 90% of the time be on this one and just be on the other one only if if you're completely done with my whatever I'm teaching you. Yes, Rachel?
I wanted to save this, but I wasn't sure before I moved on, so I didn't lose what I had done
Yeah.
so far.
So
But I
say,
wasn't sure how to save it.
yeah, saying done. That's all you needed to do.
Oh, I
You
hit
say
done.
done. And that saves
Oh.
it. Okay.
It still has a little asterisk on the top of the
Where?
where it says RGB/A8, and it has an asterisk, which usually means that it's not saved.
Over here,
Way up at the top of the screen.
where I'm pointing, it says RGB, because I don't see anywhere where it says RGB. That's why I'm asking you, where are you seeing that?
Oh, should I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead and show me.
Okay.
I think you're in Photoshop, and that's why I'm a bit worried. I think you probably said open instead of done. Let me see. Share your
Okay, well,
screen.
I'll share my screen.
Let's see, yeah. Because what you're describing is once RAW has closed, but until I see it, I'm not sure that I can answer that. Yeah, go ahead and say cancel. We're not saving as. And yeah, you left VDI and you already opened. This is your JPEG. Oh no, this is the JPEG that you opened at the beginning that I said don't do it. Go ahead and close this JPEG up at the top.
Here?
No, that's Photoshop. Hold on. Go down to the name of that one. Click there. Yeah. And close just that one file. There we go.
Okay.
And now go back down to Bridge. And if you go to the image, it's so small, I can't see. Hover over that one, see how there's little sliders in there?
Yeah,
And that means that those are the changes you made in raw, so they've been saved, and you probably said done when
yeah, I said
I
done.
told it to say done. That's it, that saved it, there's no
Okay.
save or anything, it's just done. When if you
Okay.
said open, you would continue into Photoshop. If you say cancel, you would lose your changes. So done is basically saving the changes. So
Okay.
good question. Yeah, it's weird. We're accustomed to always having to save. So why doesn't it say save? You know, it says done, which is kind of like such a different name. So yeah, good point. Someone else was waving their hands, Mary Ellen, yeah?
Yeah, when I double click, it opens in Photoshop rather than in RAW.
Well, if what you're double clicking is a DNG,
It is
will,
PNG.
well, something's wrong then. Because a DNG will open in RAW, which is part of Photoshop, but it first opens directly. So if that's happening to you, then do a right click and say open in Camera Raw. But that's weird. Do you want to share your screen to show me? Because something else is going on. A DNG should. So go ahead and share your screen so I can see what's happening. Please.
Why is it not letting me into Zoom?
Do you need some support? If you haven't shared for in a while, share and then share again. Just tell me where you're at so I can walk you through the process, what's happening.
In Zoom Workplace.
No, yeah, so are you seeing me, us talking?
I'm seeing you.
Okay, all right,
or
so in the
me.
bottom, the same place where you go to your chat or to mute and unmute yourself, if you keep going to the right, if you don't see a green share button, then you might have it hidden under the 3 dots at the end of that row. Like if the window is small enough, if you don't see like audio, video, chat, reactions, share, if you don't see that, then you'll see a circle with 3 dots. Click on that and you'll find the share in there. No?
No, it must have closed me out of Zoom.
Well, no, I see you on Zoom, so you're not closed out of Zoom. Are you on a Mac or on a PC?
Mac.
Okay, so then head down to the dock where you see the little icon that says Zoom and give it a right click and then say show all windows. It might be that that window has minimized.
Just does Zoom US.
No. I don't know. Down in the dock, do you see your place where you have all your icons that you open up?
Yes,
Okay, click on, do you see the Zoom icon?
I see the Zoom icon.
Okay, right click on it. And then the third choice up is show all windows.
It doesn't give me that, it just says Zoom US.
Let me share my screen for a minute. So unfortunately, Zoom doesn't share itself well, but I can share my dock. And so when you right click on this, you don't see show all windows.
No,
You just have Zoom, yes? Okay. So then what are you seeing me on? You're seeing me talking, right?
yes.
Okay. Do you see just me and nothing else? Like nothing
On
around
the
it?
Mac, I see just you.
But do you see any buttons? But if you were to mute yourself right now, where would you go? Go mute yourself.
I would mute myself on my PC.
Oh, because you're doing, okay. Well, I'm a little bit at a loss right now how to you must have minimized something and you can't see it, so I'm lost. If on the Mac, you can see the buttons for mute and unmute, that's where you'd find the share. But if you don't, then you must be in some other place that I
got you.
can't. There you go, you found it, okay. There you go, perfect. All right, so this one you can completely close, just close this whole thing and yeah. Okay, and close this. You guys should learn to not have anything open other than your Photoshop, that way it's much easier. Okay, so now click on. It's so tiny. Yeah, okay. So now let's go to your, hi Saul, by the way, thanks for joining us. We're working on Camera Raw. So go to your image, the one that you worked with in Raw,
Yes. I
which
see.
is the one that has the little sliders. Go click on that. Yeah, and then double click and see it opened in Raw.
Okay,
I think you must have been clicking on the JPEG, which was right next to it or something. I don't know, because this one will open in RAW. And since you had both selected, there it is. Now go to the bottom little film strip there, or contact sheet strip or whatever, and click on the one that we're working on, which is the landscape. And then right underneath you, there's these 5 little buttons. Move your mouse down, and that one, click on that to disappear the strip. Yep. And then now we're back. Okay.
thank you.
And this is, we're going to continue. You're welcome. All right. So, so we are working on Bridge. We have been working on this image. There's 2 of them. There's the DNG and the JPEG. So the DNG is the one that we opened, which is raw. This time we also opened the one next to it, this brick building, and then we opened 2 at a time. And here's where we are. Okay. So we've already worked through all of these tools. Just for now, to be able to see things better, I'm going to contract that light tools and collapse them a little bit so that I can, you don't have to if you have a lot of space, but if you begin to open all of these at the same time, you can have so much stuff, so that way I can move into color. And I'm going to open color. Now, in color, we have a couple of different things first. White balance implies something that the camera did automatically when you were there, decided this is what's right, and made a choice. And that's what as shot means. So it's showing you with the white balance that the computer, that the camera thought you were needing to use. There's a choice to change it here. I'm not going to use that right now. I'm going to show you that the only difference between opening a JPEG in RAW or opening a RAW in RAW, so to say, oh, thing is happening again, that when I click away, I can't. Oh my God. Stop my share, select it, and come back in. I have no idea why Zoom is not letting me. I've taught Photoshop for years, and this has never happened. And I make one of these choices, it all seems, so I'm not going to make a choice right now. And in RAW, you have all these choices here that are presets of different lighting. So if you want to see what options are other than the way the camera perceived it, then you can tell it, well, it was a very brightly lit day, or it was a very cloudy day, or I was inside and I was using artificial tungsten. And each time you choose one of these, your lighting will shift to adapt to what that should be if you were inside in tungsten lighting. And trust me, it's not going to be good. I'm going to click on that one. And tungsten lighting is very orange. So what the computer decided is that to counteract the orange, it needs to add a lot of blue. So that is what the computer tells you to do, which obviously it wasn't tungsten lighting, so that's a bad correction. But since Photoshop is not, Zoom doesn't let me continue to work, I'm gonna have to stop a share again and leave. And I'm gonna just do one more change because it's gonna go crazy every time I change. It stops working. I don't know why. Maybe I'll have to go to my other computer. But anyway, I'm going to keep doing that. So now I changed it outside so that you don't have to deal with to cloudy. When I changed it to cloudy, the cloudy light is very, very blue. And so these are things you just learn out of knowing some photography. Cloudy light is very blue. And if you photograph white under a cloudy day, or if you photograph a white t-shirt under a tree in the midday, that t-shirt will have blue tinges. That's why icebergs, by the way, look so blue when you take pictures of them, because they're reflecting the blue sky. So light is different and colors are different every place depending on what's surrounding them. And so anyway, in this case, it made it much yellower. And if I see what I had before, see how it added a lot of yellow to counteract the blue of that light. So it's the opposite of what happened before. Got it? And you might like that or not, but these are just presets. If you have a JPEG open here, you won't have these presets. You will only have the as shot version. And now I'm gonna have to stop my share and start again. So I'm gonna leave it in as shot because I can't play around with those anymore. You guys go up and down because every time I do that, my stuff is disappearing. And let's all revert back to as shot. I don't even dare do this one right now because things are going to move, but I'm going to show you later how to use the eyedropper. But this right now, since it stopped sharing, it's driving me crazy. Let me show you the sliders. The sliders here are very important. The one that you want to move less are temperature and tint. These should be very, very careful with. This has to do with white balance, and it's better. What is going to happen is if I move it to the right, I'm putting in a whole bunch of yellow. But what else is happening? Remember I told you to be careful because when you move things around, it affects other stuff. And I'm trying to put more yellow or more blue, more yellow or more blue, and everything goes more blue. And, you know, dirt shouldn't be blue, and everything goes more yellow, and dirt shouldn't be yellow. But if it's sunset, then yeah, maybe dirt should be yellow because everything is being tinged by it. Anyway, most of the times you want to be kind of like very gentle in these kind of changes or movements. But what I'm trying to say that if you move it up there, what's happening is ultimately that you are also affecting, and I'm going to open these, you're ultimately affecting the light. And so that's why you're getting now some clips, right? So if you decide to put a lot of yellow in it, then you need to come over here and bring down maybe the whites. Does that make sense? I'm not going to make that choice right now, but I want to tell you that when you move these around and you see, and you have those clipping warnings there, then this, and now I moved it deep into the blue. Now I'm getting clippings. If you choose to leave it in the blue, then you need to go and modify again the stuff that you have at the beginning. And I don't remember what the setting was to start with. And if I go to custom, I'm going to have to restart again. So can someone read to me this number of when we started? Go to as shot and then read me the number you get as shot. I'm going to type it in.
5250.
5250. Okay. So there, that brings it back to not changing the numbers. And it should say as shot there for you. If you go back to as shot, but I don't want to do that because again, I'm going to fall out of Zoom. All right. So that's bringing it back to 0. If I don't do that, then tint, which I now am reading, it says 14. If I go tint, then I'm adding either magenta or green. Magenta or green. And that's because light tends to have the colors of light, like Kelvin, how you measure light, when you measure light, when you have stronger or darker or less light, whatever you have, it changes the temperature of the light. It changes the color from blue to yellow. And then tint, changing to magenta or green. And those are the 4 colors that we can flick around to try to get everything to be as neutral as possible. And that's what white balance is all about. So this is a place where you can move these. I recommend being very careful how much you move them and where you move them to, because ultimately these are just very, very global. And unless you want a very global change, you might not want to make too much change. But if you're going for a deep sunset color, you might move it a little bit more into the yellow or not. And if you're trying to make it dawn, the dawn is a bit bluer than the sunlight, right? And so, yes, you also would have a low light, but it would be a bit bluer. So then that might be a choice that you can make as far as being able to manipulate your choices. Anyway, I'm going to leave those kind of where they started. And the ones that really make a difference here are vibrance to saturation. If you had a person in here, I would say never use saturation, because saturation makes everything skin go bright orange. But in a landscape, saturation and vibrance, although they're very similar, saturation is global. It makes everything equally more intense, or everything equally less intense, to the point that to the far left, you get no color at all. So this isn't about darkness or lightness now. This is about color. So I'm going to turn these clips off so that you can stop seeing for a moment that. And notice that when I saturate to the right, I get to the point that colors are neon and just like, whoa, that's not real. And if I go all the way to the left, I get to black and white. So it's the intensity of the colors. I'm going to double click to go back into the middle. It's fine to use saturation back and forth if you think that everything needs to be made more intense or less intense. That's saturation. It's kind of global. Vibrance, on the other hand, if I go bring it back to the middle, double click, it would already had a little bit of vibrance. I was moving things around. Vibrance also makes colors more intense, but it's more intelligent. It looks at the image and it goes, well, looks like this color is already intense, so I don't need to saturate it, but that is less. So it tries to even out the saturation of your image. So when I go all the way to the right on saturation, it won't usually be as fake as vibrance is. That's as saturation is. That said, I don't recommend usually going into the ends of any of these sliders that we're using at in general. So when I go to the very end of vibrance, I still am getting some colors that are a little bit intense, but they're not as bad as, and I'm going to back again, as when I go to the end of saturation where it really looks like it's a bit neon. And that said, it gets so bright that it kind of hides the fact that this went bluer because my eyes are just brought to that, versus when I went all the way to the right with vibrance, it brought that up to a more passable orange, but it also lets me see that it brought up the sky to make it bluer, and it brought up the green to make it greener. So all the tones got saturated a bit more according to their need. That said, the dirt here went a little bit red. So again, you can't go as far as that, but I'm just showing you the differences between that to the end and that to the end, right? So there's a place for making everything a little bit more saturated or not, depending on what you need, and a place to using a bit of vibrance or not, depending on what you need, or quite a bit of vibrance, but don't just necessarily go boom to everything. Just slowly go either all the way to the top and then begin to bring it down until you like it, or slowly begin to bring it up. And then if you think, well, I've gone a bit too far, then back up, right? Until you find what you like. And in this case, I think that this can do with quite a bit based on what I did to my lighting, right? Which was a pretty intense change. I think I need to boost it quite a bit because I lightened my image. If you guys didn't light your image as much as I did, then you might discover that you have to put less vibrance because they're related to each other. But when I do that, I need to now turn the clipping things on again and see if by by putting more vibrance on, suddenly I'm losing some of the color that was in the light. So if that's the choice I make for my vibrance, then I need to go back in here and I need to work a little bit on those highlights to not lose the type. Does that make sense? So you need to go back and forth and modify things until it feels good. And then again, you get to see the before and after by toggling the color. Hold it down. This is how it was. And this is what I did to it. And basically the big changes in the blues. And I like that. My blues got better. My oranges stayed kind of the same, but my blues got more intense in the choices that I made. If you use more saturation instead of vibrance, you would see that there's also a big change in your yellows. Okay. Vibrance only boosts the blues for me and just about nothing else. If I wanted some of the oranges to saturate, then I would have had to use saturation, and then I would have get both like that, both to get brighter. Okay. Now to me, that looks a little bit fake. Oh, sorry. With saturation, because that is, it lightened up stuff that definitely at that time of sunset was not so intense. So I'm going to bring the saturation to 0 and use only vibrance, but that's because based on the light changes that I made. Okay. Remember that this is how the image started. When I didn't have made it so light. So maybe if you had it at this point and you modified from there, maybe you already have a deep blue and you just want to make your oranges more orange, then you would change your choices. Okay. All right. So now that's what color does. I'm going to close color. There's a ton of other choices here that for now I'm going to ignore. I just want to say, if I go to the before and after that we used before, this was my before and this is my after. Now I have not only light changes, but also color changes. Now I'm seeing quite a bit of a difference before and after in mine. Before it was just lighter here and that was about it. But now I'm seeing that there's a lot of color gained in the blues and a little bit of color gained in the color. And I like that change, okay? If you guys left the front much darker, then this will be even starker. So this is a combination of both, and you can use this to turn on and off one or the other, or you can go all the way to this first button down here and just go back to default. And that one is not a toggle, it's an on and off, on and off. And this is showing you where you started at versus that midpoint. Okay. There we go. All right. So if this is how I started, and that's where I am right now, I think I prefer where I am right now in the version where I'm trying to make things lighter. I'm going to show you now. I'm going to go back to this. I clicked on this one and I went 4 more times, click, click, click to get back to this mode where I don't see before and after. And I'm going to say, yeah, but what if I want to do this differently? I'm not sure that what I did is right. Can I freeze these settings in place? And can I go and maybe see if I would have liked this to be less light in front, or without modifying this, which I think might be pretty good. And if I modify them, I'm losing them. You know what I'm trying to say? Is there any way to kind of preserve these settings so I can go play with other settings and see which I prefer? Remember, I told you it's all about the story you're trying to tell, and maybe you want to tell a different story of this image. And that would mean changing these settings. So let's do that. I'm going to go over here to this toolbar, and I'm going to choose this kind of little rectangle stacked on top of each other. It's called snapshots. Okay. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to pull up snapshots. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a snapshot of these settings. It's not like a screenshot of the photo itself. It's a snapshot of the settings. And to do that, I'm going to click on this little plus, on this little kind of guy that's right there. And when I click on that little icon next to the word snapshots, I'm going to say that this one is a lighter foreground, just to distinguish it based on what I did in comparison to how I started. There you go. Oh, it's doing that again where I need to stop my share for it to work. I've got to reset each time. Driving me crazy, but that's okay because you guys are still working on it. Each time I have to go there. So I may create a lighter foreground choice. Lighter foreground choice. Okay, did everyone create their snapshot? Give me a yes if you're good with that. Okay. All right. Odessa's good. Mary Ellen, are you good with that? Gerard, okay. Saul, I maybe you're not here yet at this point yet, but okay. Created a snapshot. All right. Let's go and make a different version. I'm going to go back to the tools up here, the little slider there. That's accessing all my editing tools again. And now I'm going to go, you know what? I think I'd rather go a dark way. So if you already went dark, now maybe try a light way. I don't know, just double click on everything and start from 0 again to kind of get rid of all these choices. And I'm going to move this back to 0, for example. And now I'm back nearer to how this image started. And now maybe I do want to do something else. And so this time I'm actually going to make my blacks a little bit blacker. My whites, I'm going to bring them down. I might intensify my highlight. I'm going to make everything a little bit darker this time, which as opposed to what I did last time. I'm going to go for shadow, shadows are a bit more intense. So anyway, I want a very different kind of thing going on. And then I'm going to go to my color, and I'm going to make these colors very saturated. All right, so this is a very different set of choices than what the ones I had made before. Again, it can be right or wrong. Right now, I'm not trying to quantify or qualify if they're right or wrong. I'm just saying that these are a different set of choices than what I did before. And both are correct in that neither of them have clipped tones. But now if I look down here, foreground is very dark, and I still have some intense color, but maybe I'll make it even a bit more intense in the coloring, just to really have a much different set of choices. Good. So play around, make something that's completely different as far as you can in your knowledge of how to use these. And then let's go and do another snapshot. And I'm going to go to snapshots again, which was over here. And I'm going to click on this little icon again, and I'm going to call this one darker foreground, for example, just to distinguish them. And now I have to stop my share to make it work again, which, how many times have I expressed how frustrating that is? I'm tired of saying it. And now I see both my choices. This is the first one I did, and this is my second one. So I can flip from back to forward. This isn't the before and after. These are my process darker foreground, and this is my process lighter foreground. Does that make sense? I was able to make two very different correct ways of editing this photo. When I say correct, meaning neither one has clipped colors or clipped tones. So these would both print correctly, but I'm telling a very different story with this image than I am with this one, aren't I? So I can save two versions. I can save 5 versions. I can go back over here and I can decide, and now, yes, I'm going to go a little bit crazy. I can go into like color grading, and I'm going to make, and you don't know how to use these yet. I'm just kind of doing something completely different. I'm just moving things around in a way that might affect things in a way that that looks really, 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 really different. Okay, so now I made some stuff that, never mind, I'm just moving things up and down the spectrum. Don't worry too much if it's right or wrong. I'm trying to make something that's really intense. Okay, so now now I go and I save this one, and I'm going to call this one intense. Right? So now I can go from, stop my share, click it on, reshare. Now I have darker foreground, intense, lighter foreground. The same image has been done in 3 different versions. Granted that the one that's intense is a mess, and I wouldn't normally leave it that way, but just so that you can really see how I can choose, and I can keep editing this. This one, of all things, isn't that flexible as other images might be, because it's a sunset. There's nothing else there. If I had other things going, I might be able to make some much more different, but how many sunset differences can you make? Well, I guess I could make the colors that are orange be purplish, pink and purple instead of orange. I could do that. Anyway, good. So that's how you're going to say it. Choose one. I'm going to go with that one, say, as my final, for example, of all the choices. And I can save out 3 different versions of this, but I'm going to go with this one. I go back to my edits, right? And then I'm going to use that to continue. If I were to now say done, everyone go say done. Doesn't matter if you like what you did or not, just say done. When you go back to bridge, that which you see here will be the one that you chose of all your 3 versions. So if you chose the one where the colors are brightly bizarre, that's what you would see here. If you chose the one where they're light, that's what you'll be seeing here. If you chose the one that's dark, that's what you'll be seeing here. And when you open it again, the good news is you still have all your choices there. It's not like you lost them. You can go back and say, well, now I'm going to continue on this version or that version or that version. Does that make sense? It's a way of playing around with an image and see which way you like it better. Most of the times, it's the snapshots I do are nowhere near this different. Most of the times I'll have one where I go a little bit lighter on this, a little bit darker on that, and I'm not sure which one's better. So I'll make 2 or 3 versions, and then I'll go up and down and go, I like that one. I'm purposely making 3 really different ones for you guys to get the message. But normally, actually, it's a very slight difference, and I'm just testing them out before I decide which one I want to continue with. And then I go, okay, maybe that one, I'll go with that one. I'll go with this one. And then I just keep working and I make some other changes. At some point I can go and throw away the snapshots of the version that I'll never go back to, and I'll keep going. If all of this worked for you and this is good, then give me a yes. All right, Rebecca, how can I help?
I made snapshots and then when I went back to Bridge and opened it up again, the snapshots weren't there.
Okay.
Was there something to save them or?
And you had changed the names, you had a name
Yeah.
that you were going back and forth on?
Mhm.
Nope, there's nothing to do to save. It's just say done and they save. This kind of all auto saves itself. So that's
I don't think
bizarre.
I did done. I don't think I did done.
Well, if you didn't say done, even more so, you should still have them. But if you say done, I was just trying to show you that once you do say done, they
Mm.
stay with the image, but you're saying they didn't stay. So maybe you need to share your screen so we can see maybe what else might be happening. Go ahead and share your screen. Because that's a puzzle that I don't know how to answer unless I see. Okay, so you went over here, make a snapshot, click on that. Click on that, yeah, give it a name. Or not, whatever, but call it 1 or 2. And then say, okay. Okay, now go back to this tools and the slider. And now make something, go make it black and white, something completely different. I don't know. There you go. Now go back to the snapshots and save another one. Call it B&W or whatever and say, okay. And now see if you can go up and down the 2. Go and select your other one. There it is. There it is. Okay, now go say done. Good. Now open it up again. Go to Bridge, open it up, and now go up to your snapshots. And there you go. You have your 2 versions there. So maybe you just hadn't completed your making your snapshots or something, but there's working. Okay. Now go back to your edits and continue working from there. So edits would be the little sliders at the top. And there you go. Now you can keep working on getting this in some other way, shape, or form. All right. I'm not sure what had happened, but it's working now. Maybe there was the things didn't save. I don't know.
I
but there
don't
we
think
go.
I hit done.
Well, but I'm trying to say done, it doesn't matter. That's why I'm not sure that's the issue, because what I'm trying to say is that when you open it up
Mhm.
and do all these changes, I could continue going here and making more and more and more. And done is just, I'm leaving the computer, I'm gone. So it's not about saving them with done. If I don't say done and I just kind of move on, these still are there. So you need to create one, make some changes, say cancel, and then they'd be there. Done just means that if I close the file, I don't lose those features. So, and I close the file by saying done. That's all that I was trying to say when I said say done, to show you that your changes won't be lost. But they shouldn't have been lost even if you hadn't said done. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So maybe they hadn't been made, or I'm not sure. Anyway, but it wouldn't have been, but I had to stop it because when I went there, my thing again disappeared. It wouldn't have been because of the word done. That just means, yeah, I'm leaving, and right now I don't want to work with this image anymore. And the changes stay. When you're in Photoshop and you have a lot of history, and you save and you close the file, when you open the Photoshop again, that history is gone. In this case, the settings, if you save them as a snapshot, they're not gone. You can keep going back. Okay, it's different than history, but it stays with the image when you close it. That's really the distinction I was trying to make. All right. There's a ton more that we can do with all these guys. I'm going to skip them for now, see if we have a bit more time later to come back to more. I want to tell you, well, what do we do now? If this is the one that I like and I did everything I can, and just so you know, this is where you would mask, this is where you would retouch. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to do these in Photoshop. This is where I would crop. So there's just a lot more that we can do in here This is where I would work on filters. I can say, why would I mask? Well, maybe if I would mask, if I wanted to make the sky much darker on the top than the bottom, you know, like these, as much as they are targeting different parts of the light spectrum, it's all the blacks or all the whites versus just the whites on top should be whiter and the whites on the bottom should be darker, something like that. You can't do that without masking. But I'm going to ignore the masking part of this right now. And I'm going to say, okay, guess what? If I say done, I'm finished with this picture. What if I want to open it in Photoshop and now maybe put a little duckling following her mom on the lake, right? Or what if I want to make a mask and I do want to darken or lighten this and now in Photoshop, because I can do a better mask in there and I just want to focus on that way. Or maybe I want to make the sky look like it's got a few little stars pointing to, the moon is beginning to sliver through. Anyway, for whatever reason, if I want to go into Photoshop, what I do next instead of done is I say open. But if I just click on open, it'll open as a flat image. I'm going to do that. You don't do that. Watch for a second what I'm doing, and then I will show you the differences. First, let me just say open. Just hang in there. And hold on. Okay, so now I had to do that twice because I made a bit of a mess. So here I said open. And this is the image in Photoshop that I just modified in RAW. It's a flat layered background. Over here, it still says DNG, but it is not the DNG anymore. All the sliders I just moved around, I don't have anymore. This is the beginning point of this photo now. And if I want to go and undo that I did too much vibrance or not, I don't have those sliders available in here. Does that make sense? There is Camera Raw inside of here. I showed you, and we can keep doing other stuff. And so that's a different conversation we're going to have. But it's like, this is the photo I took with a camera, and this is where I'm starting from if I want to now make a change. So now I'm going to just do a quick exaggerated change. If I want to make this be like look at like Northern Lights or something like that and make it a completely different thing, that could look like it's Northern Lights on top, but usually Northern Lights doesn't show up in the bottom. So maybe I would mask this out and have only the skies have that. You know what I'm talking about with the Northern Lights? I'm just kind of making a very, very abrupt example without much reality to it, where maybe this is what you would see on one side of the image and that's what you see on another. So I mean, that wouldn't be something I want to do in Photoshop or not. Okay. Now, what I'm trying to say is this is now my beginning point. I'm going to go back now to where I left you guys, which is when I open this one again, you are here. The other option is to open this up as, and I'm going to go down here so you can see, because otherwise the thing is not sharing itself. Hold on. If I change this, oh, my brain, I have to stop share. It doesn't, I'm just going crazy. My thing is not sharing. Every time I make a change, my Zoom grays out and I can't keep working. Very, 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 very frustrating. Okay. So now I'm going to share that window. Again. All right. So plan B would be, instead of just saying open, would be to click on this little arrow. And instead of opening it only, which is what we did, is open it as an object. And remember, I began the class explaining smart objects. So when I open as an object, then I go into Photoshop. I have to stop my share because it's not letting me do it without stopping my share. And now when I can share again. Hi, Susan. Okay, now when I go into Photoshop, this is now got this little box down there, which I taught you. For those of you who came in a bit late, the whole like first half an hour, 45 minutes of the class, maybe even hour, was all about smart objects. So if you haven't heard the whole smart objects conversation, go back to the recording to listen to that, okay? But anyway, meanwhile, I have two images open right now. I have this one, which was not a smart object. It was just that. And I have this one, which is a smart object. But I had only one file. I just opened it two different ways, two different times. So if you only have one of them, so maybe you did the smart object now, or maybe you did the non-smart object. I don't know which one you did. You might only have one open, right? In Photoshop. So then go back to Bridge, open it again, because it's always there. The draw hasn't changed. Open the raw one more time. And this time say done, or say open as object or open as smart object. Do the opposite. I'm sorry, it's not sharing well because of my sharing issues, but go ahead and open the way that's different than what you did before. Okay. So that you can end up in Photoshop. Oh. Wow, I just upgraded Zoom because we had some changes, and I'm wondering if this is a glitch, because this is not sustainable. This is driving me bonkers. Must be driving you bonkers all the time to see me come and go, come and go, come and go. Okay, so what I want you to end up with is with a version that's not, and I don't care right now for any changes that you may, a version that's just a regular image, and there's no little box here on the layer, and a version that is a little box on the layer, and it is a smart object. If you are there and you have two versions that have opened, one as each type, then give me a yes. All right. Yeah, there was a hand up. Rebecca?
I keep going to open it and it opens in Photoshop and then bounces back to RAW.
Let me first, before I do that, let me share. It's good because I'm sharing Windows. Let me share my entire screen, see if I can do this without having the issues I've been having. Here's my entire window. If I go to Bridge and I open something that is clearly a raw file, the DNG that has been edited because it has those little sliders. If I open it, it should open clearly in raw and nothing else. When I want to move on from here, I have the choice of just clicking on the word open, or clicking on it and open it as an object, or opening it as a copy. Those are three different choices. So if you open as one or the other, it should bring you into Photoshop. So I'm going to click on open as object. It should open in Photoshop as an object. When I go back to Bridge and I open it again, now I've opened 4 of them. And instead I just say open, it opens as an object. So you can keep sourcing yourself from the same one again and again and again and again. And now I have 4 open. They're copies of each other, but there's 4 versions. I have 2 of each. If that's not happening, then I'll have you share your screen to see what's happening to you.
It sounds like that's what's happening. But let me share. It's
All right, let me
Oh.
have you share your screen then.
okay. And well, I'll just share the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a bit easier.
Okay, so
Okay,
I'm here, right?
yeah,
And go to open as an object.
Yep.
And it bounces around and there it is. And there it goes.
it looks almost like you have more. Go ahead and say cancel here for a second.
Yeah, I think I'm getting multiples of the same picture.
Yeah, go ahead and say cancel. Is it letting you?
New.
Go ahead and say done then. Okay, and it
And it
opens up,
bounced
say
back.
done again. Yeah, this looks like it's a glitch. Say done again. And no matter how many times you say done. Yeah, it's like you had 3 versions open. And
It-
in fact, look up at the Photoshop, and yeah, you also ended up
it's-
with a ton of different ones. See there? You have
Yeah,
like,
I
so
have a
yeah.
feeling they're all the same.
So go ahead. Oh, if you had even more than 4, you had 5. Each time you do it, you're getting a new one. So
Yeah.
close them all up. Say, don't save to all of them. Close, 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 close. And let's just do it one run over. Because otherwise this gets really good. Oof, you had a ton. Yeah. And say done. Or don't save. Yeah. Don't save. Wow. You had, I don't know, like 8 or 9. You can do a quick close by doing Command W, by the way, if you want. You must have had like 7 or 8 open.
But then how do you still have to go down to don't
You
save?
don't save, yeah, but you don't need to go up and down, up and down. Keep your
Okay,
mouse
then
on the,
that's a different, this is one I wanted to open in raw
Okay.
because it's a raw picture, but
all right, so close
Okay.
it now for now.
for how to do that.
Yeah, so close it and then I'll help you do that. And then close the,
I've got one now.
okay, but close it,
Close it.
yeah. Because I want it, that whatever happened, that shouldn't have happened. So go back to bridge. Now what, see, so can't, what, this isn't bridge, this is, you have another raw again open, so cancel now. Okay, so where are you? Oh, you're opening the original one from here.
I did.
Okay,
should
go
be
back
in
to bridge for a second, just because it's what you're doing there, you was opening not a new one, but the same one again and again and again. Because that one, anyway, it could have worked to do it that way, but it's more confusing. If you go and you start again, from the new one and you open it as an object, see how raw
Yeah, now it
disappeared now.
worked. It
Okay.
worked.
And then go back to bridge and open one as just open instead of a copy.
Yeah, it worked.
Okay. And then you said you wanted to know how to open your other one as raw.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It's
where is
it's
your
in
other one?
photos. And in photos, if I right click, it's edit with and then
Oh, yeah.
Photoshop.
All right. So then if you're taking it straight from photos and not making it a file, then you can open it in Photoshop, but it'll go straight to Photoshop, right? It
Mhm.
won't open as raw from photos. So if you want to open it as raw, you need to take it out of photos or just in photos, just make a export of this one. So go up to, and this is not Photoshop, but go up to File, Export. And now say Export Unmodified Original, the second one. Okay, and then say Export, and it'll ask you where to put it. Down there, Export at the bottom right, Export. And it'll say, where do you want to put it? So go put it, can you put it in the same folder that we're in right now with Photoshop in the summer class files? Go up to the top. And no, you have it there. So, okay, you had it there, but never mind. Go there, you found it there
Right
too.
there.
It's fine. Yeah, double click. And export into that.
So
Okay,
now it's in
now
bridge.
go to bridge
And
and go find it. It's somewhere over there. It should be there if you finish the save. And there it is. And now if it is a DNG and you double click, it should open. Yeah, it is. Double click. And it opened in raw. Okay. Cool.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank
All right.
you.
There is a way to open raw files inside of Photoshop directly, but right now I don't even want to continue confusing the issue. Right now, I just want us to keep this as the way we're doing it, and that's it. So, cool. Any other questions, you guys? Has this worked for you all? You're all able to, you have 2 different versions in Photoshop now, the object and the non-object, so to say, the smart object and the regular flat file. Okay. I'm going to share my Photoshop again now. And now that, now hopefully Zoom behaves better. All right. So now I have 2 versions of the same thing, but one is a smart object. That said, by the way, you guys, I could have just opened regularly and then converted the whole layer into smart object and it would have been the same, to say the truth. But it just makes a difference in how it arrives, in the sense that now, those of you who were here at the beginning of the day, What's the difference between this one or this one? What did I tell you that a smart object does? I only gave you one example today yet.
Doesn't it not use pixels? It flattens it out into just color points?
No, that's a very technical explanation. That is not at all what happens, but you're kind of in the place where something definitely happens. And what tool did we use today that allowed us to do something? I'm kind of fishing here without saying the words, because if I say the words, I'll give it away. What did we do? And if you need a reminder, I'm going to go over here and remember over here that we did something with this guy when he was a smart
Right.
object.
You mean the transform?
Yes. It'll allow me to transform and what? What's the difference between this one and this one if I transform these?
It doesn't degrade the picture.
Yeah. And if I go here on this one now, I'm going to unlock it. Okay. And if I command T and make it smaller because it's an inset in a brochure, for example, right? Like I have, oh, come to my beautiful place. And I have 4 photos in this brochure. And so I have to make up a little grid. And then I say, welcome, there's a deal. And I hit return. And then I go, oh, I didn't really want 4. I'm going to make this one big. And then I'm going to make the other 4 sliding on top of it. I'm going to put them whatever. And I want to go big again. Then right now what's happening, and I'm not saying immediately, because immediately I could have done an undo and y'all know that, but I'm saying after revision and stuff, and I take it to someone and they go, no, let's use this photo instead as the background. And I try to make it the same. It doesn't look that bad. I'm going to do a command 1 to get to 100%, but there's a quality difference now in how fuzzy or not fuzzy it looks. Then if I go 100% on the original one, which is tack, sharp, this is the one that I made smaller and bigger, and it was not a smart object. So look at the little twigs, and let me go 200% so that you guys can see it better. This is what happened to those little twigs. Might be harder to see over here, but the ripples are also worse. Versus this one, if I see it at 200%, look at the twigs, how sharp they are. And the swirls in the water, how sharp they are, right? And that's because I transformed this one up and down, and it wasn't a smart object. So when I made it tiny, it had to dump a lot of pixels. And now when I made it big, I ruined it. And I'm making really big changes, so it's very obvious that the quality is different. But if you don't see it 100%, you don't see the quality difference, because if I don't see it at 100%, this is looking fine. What am I complaining about? It's fine. It looks good. That's why you always have to see it at 100% to see if it truly is fine or not. So I'm going to do command 1 or control 1. And then I go, ooh, that doesn't like fine at all. I'm going to exaggerate it to command 2 so that you see it a bit better. And I can begin to see that there's no sharpness. And this photo was tack sharp. So that happened because of the transformation that was not done with a smart object. This one, on the other hand, and now I'm going to, I know there's some questions. This one is a smart object. So we're going to do that again. And this is kind of review of what we did at the beginning of the class for those of us who joined us a bit later. Now I'm going to do command T or control T to transform this guy. Oh, and by the way, when it's a smart object, it gives you these X's in there. That means it's a smart object. Now I'm going to make it really tiny, really, really tiny, and hit return. And normally I wouldn't make it that small, but just so you see that no matter how small I make it, when I hit return and finish my transformation, when I once again now make it big, I have it fill the screen again and hit return. Now, if I go to see it at 200%, it's still as tack sharp as it was at the beginning. It didn't, when it made it smaller, it protected those pixels from being affected. It's a non-destructive modification. The transformation that I did here is a very destructive modification. I didn't put the little protection force field around it, which is what a smart object does. So when I made it smaller, I threw away pixels. And when I made it bigger, I'd had to invent pixels. It had to interpolate. This is truly a big deal because remember when for homework, I had you guys do, put in the birds or stuff like that over here. That some of you guys put 1 or 2 birds in places. When you did these transformations, and actually, Catalina, who made this, had just left, but when you brought this bird in here and you made transformations like warp and change, or you probably made one bigger and then smaller to see how it worked. Over here, maybe you made it first big, then small, then maybe you adjusted it. If you did all of that to the image and it was not a smart object, then each time you did that, you degraded the little guy a little bit by little bit. If you made this temple make it really small and then you went, oh, that's kind of fake, make it bigger again to put it there, and then you say, no, let me make even bigger and have it appear over there. If that is not a smart object, each change, each transformation you make, you're degrading it slower, bit by bit. Does that make sense? So whenever you're working with composites, in this case is the example we're giving, and you are transforming them, their size, you should consider first, clearly turn them all into smart objects and then play around with the size until you're happy, so that you don't truly affect the quality of that element. Okay, if I could go to 100% on these guys, and if you had gone up and down, then you might have affected the quality, which is one of the possibilities of what might have happened here. I don't know, but this one might
I
have
think
been.
that's exactly what happened, because it was a sharp picture when I started, but I did resize it several times.
Okay, there you go. So at each resize, you lost and lost quality because you went up and down, okay? And so if you go to the same file, turn this guy off, bring it in again, turn it into smart object, and then make it be the size, you'll have a much higher quality image, okay? Because this is indicative, these little halos and stuff, those are indicative of interpolation, and that's why I kind of guessed, and I'm glad to be proven right, that what was happening is that you just didn't do that up and down. All right, so you've been waiting for quite a while for a question, Rebecca. Sorry, I had to continue for a little bit. So what's your question?
Well, I think you partially answered it, but why wouldn't you always make something a smart object? Is it because it takes too much
No.
space in the brochure, or?
Great question, because that's the next place I'm going. I mean, why? Why wouldn't we do this? It's like, duh. Why don't I do this? Well, it does have quite a few, it has huge benefits, tons of benefits. So that's not the issue. But it also has quite a few negatives. When you are going to do anything to this image that has to be modified at a pixel level, the smart and you know what I'm going to do? I'm kind of tired of going back and forth on the file. So I'm going to go grab this one. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it into here. So now we have, and I'm going to just close it. So you guys can do that. I just want to go into one or the other. So go over here, say Command A to one of them. I don't care which, and then copy, Command or Control C. So Command A means select all, Command or Control C for copy, then come to this one and then do Command or Control V for paste. And now you'll have both in one. Okay. And then we can close the other one because that way we don't keep having two files. But now we have the non-smart object and the smart object. So now I'm going to double click and I'm going to call this one smart object. And this one is going to be not smart object. It's going to be not smart object. Okay. SO, whatever. And this one, yes, is a smart object. And now you can compare and you can see there's a little box here that's missing. If your image is one that has a lot of white in the bottom, it might be harder to see because it's a little white box on top of white. But in this case, we happen to have a really dark little corner there. So that's cool because you can see very clearly that little box that makes us a smart object. All right, so go ahead and do that. And if you need help again, all I did is I went to the fun file. I said select all, Command A, copy. And then I came to this one and Command V and it changed. Now, I don't care if it was one order or the others, which one went into which one. Now that I've made this into a layered file, when I try to save it again, it won't save. I'm going to have to save and Command S, and it'll save as a PSD. So now I'm going to call this one Smart Object example. I know it came from raw. That was what I was originally teaching. But right now that I open them, I'm ready for it to be all about the smart object question. And at the time, we're doing good. We still have 20 minutes. Okay. Once you have done this and you have two layers, one on top of the other, they're identical visually. Well, actually mine, I moved a little bit because that was a baddie, but it's okay. They should be identical. That was just me using my mouse by mistake. Go ahead and give me a yes. I'm trying to make them be in the same spot. This one is showing up down. There, I got them on the same spot. Okay. I'm not seeing yeses from everyone. So Odessa, Rebecca.
I must have missed a step again.
Okay. So all I did was I had two files, right?
Yeah,
So
I've got
on
that.
on one of them,
But
do
when I saved it,
Command A. No, you're not saving. You're saying Command A. Oh, you got that. It is about saving. That's the problem, not the copying
yeah,
over.
and then when I got to Bridge, it's, oh, there it is. Maybe it just took time. It was
Yeah,
like, it
I
was a
think-
gray field.
Especially when you're on Zoom, it's kind of like your computer crunches along a little bit, okay? Because we're using a lot of resources to run Zoom. So yeah, things take a little bit more time than normal. But yeah, it'll appear in a few seconds. Okay, so you do have the two layers, right?
Mhm.
All right, good. So now I'm going to clear all feedback. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go and open, go to Bridge. Go to Bridge. And now we're going to go ahead and open, I want to open a JPEG. This one, the falling star. Okay, so since it's a JPEG, it's going to open directly into Photoshop. But you might not have checked that it's much smaller in size than these were, by the way. And when I click over here, I did just by looking over here, it's 2000 by 1000 versus this one is 7000. So this one is way smaller. Okay. And let's open this JPEG, which is also quite a bit smaller, but I'm going to double click on that one. And now I have falling star, the flower, and this smart object. Okay. Smart object or not, it doesn't matter. I have two of these. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to imagine that this is our postcard or brochure or poster or whatever. So this is going to be the background of our piece. Okay. And now we're going to bring in this photo as a sample of the beauty that surrounds us or whatever. I don't want to bring the whole thing. I want to crop just around the flower. So I can do that in so many ways, but I don't want to waste time cropping. I'll just go to my selection tool right there, the good old rectangle that we've used before. And then I'm going to click and drag kind of around the flower only. And it might take a few times until you get it right. So you might need to try again, and then you're cutting some of it. So, you know, give it a try until you finally feel like you got just the flower. So I'm going to start a little bit higher to the left and to the right, and I'm going to grab the flower. Okay. And then I'm going to copy this thing that we just did, Command C. And then I'm going to go back to the falling star. I'm going to say Command V, which is paste. See what I meant about this one being way bigger? Yeah. Okay. So the first thing you'd think was, well, I'll just make it smaller. It's okay. Command C, transform, and make it smaller. But if I do that, I am going to be losing quality on this flower if later I want it bigger. So right now, the safest thing to do is to turn it into a smart object first. And again, there's so many ways to do that. Let's just go right click and convert to smart object. Now that I've protected the pixels from disappearing when I make it smaller, okay? Now I can say Control or Command T to make it smaller. And the problem is, it's kind of out of bounds. So I could move over here and do that. But another way to make the smaller, I could just go up here by numbers and I say, I just want to make it 50% smaller. So you can go over here where there's a percentage and write like 50%, for example, and then hit return. And that works if you have it so out of bounds. But if you don't want to do it with numbers, then what you can do instead is just move up until you see one of the corners, right? Command T, and then just drag it down until you see it. And just sometimes it's so big that that's not comfortable. All right, so then we're going to put this little photo here, and yeah, we're not making cute little inserts or anything yet, but we're just going to put it here. Maybe just put it on this side. I don't know what side, and make it smaller. And this will be a little inset photograph to our little poster that says, visit us in Alaska, wherever this is. Of course, this flower doesn't exist in Alaska, but what anyway. And this is just a little photo that's on top. Okay. Oops. Let me go now grab this one that's already a smart object. Let's grab the smart object. So it's already a smart object. And if I copy, hold on, watch. If I do copy and paste, okay, as it's already a smart object, I'm selecting that one to paste. When I paste it in here, did it come in as a smart object? No. See that? So that's not a good idea. What you want to do when you have something that's already been affected or smart object, we've done it before. When we had masks and other stuff, how did we transfer things? I mean, I could have done a copy paste to this one, but since I want to keep this one as a smart object, remember what we did?
Click and
Didn't we
drag.
grab it? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so perfect. Yeah, two of you trying to answer. Great. You said click and drag. And I'm going to hold down this guy and drag it up to the name until I touch the name of the one I want. And then I'm going to drag it down and drop it.
Huge.
Now it's humongous. The document has different depth, source, lower expected to proceed. Right now, say yes, which, you know, say yes. But remember, this was humongous, right? I'm going to go command minus, 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 and that's how much bigger it is. It's that big. If I do command T, it's crazy how much bigger it is. And that's why I had to go command minus, 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 so I could grab the sides of this. I said command T, which is transform. And now I can make it fit much bigger. Phew. Finally, kind of into that. Now I can do command plus, so I can zoom in again a little bit more. And now I've made this another little inset for my postcard. Now I'm having us do this to show you the pros and cons. Okay, so now I made it be the same width as that one, and I hit return or enter to commit my transformation. All right, now I did forget to show you something here, but it doesn't matter for now. All right, So this one is the flower. And this is the, instead of calling it smart object, now I'm gonna call it sunset. And this one stays as our background. And here we might say in the text, visit us in the twilight or package prices or whatever it is that you're trying to say. But we have these two guys there. All right. Once you got this, it doesn't need to look the same. You might have decided to put one there and one there. I don't really care the design wise. Just have two insets into this image, then give me a yes. And both of them are smart objects. Then give me a yes. Oh, I didn't clear your answers, so I'm going to clear your feedback and you have to give me a yes again because I don't know. By having it not cleared up, I wouldn't know. So give me a yes if you have your two insets. And right now I'm making a postcard. I could have been, this could be a bird flying over my desert, right? It doesn't matter right now. I just called them inserts because I don't want to do any masking, but I could have masked around the flower. But right now the point is the point here is smart object conversation. I don't see a yes from Mary Ellen, Rachel, Peggy. I know class is almost over, but hang in there a little bit more. We've got 5 more minutes. Here's the thing. Smart objects, as you saw, there's one negative. It brought in all those pixels of that humongous photo. And they're all in here.